CD4. Grace has joined the ATS. A slow smile appeared on Dan's face. Good for her. And the answer to your question is, I didn't know. I was hoping she would, though. Why? Because it's right for her. She needed to make a fresh start, somewhere away from her normal home life with all its memories. Did she give you any details? I only had 10 minutes with her, and all she told me was her destination. I know the camp. Dan, I know that look. Don't interfere. Grace won't thank you if you do. Leave her to make her own way. What makes you think I'd interfere? Dan gave his uncle an incredulous look. I'm just curious to know where she'll be assigned after basic training. She's promised to write and let me know how she's getting on. I'll tell you, but you make sure you leave it at that. You're taking too much interest in her, however much you deny it. She's a nice girl, Dan, but she isn't for you. You're letting your imagination run away with you again, George. I'm taking an interest in her because she's a plucky girl, and she helped me through a rocky time. Is it wrong to be grateful for that? No, of course not. But remember, your regiment will probably be among the first to be sent to fight. Don't get involved. She's suffered enough. Dan's eyes narrowed. Do you know something? No, but there's no harm in being prepared. Just remember what I've said. Keep away from that camp. If you go striding in there, you could make life difficult for Grace. You're acting as if Grace is your daughter. If she was, you wouldn't get anywhere near her. You never keep a girlfriend more than a couple of weeks before you move on to the next one. You should be married by now, or at least thinking about it. I haven't found anyone who would put up with my lifestyle yet. I'm a career soldier, George, and a wife would have to be prepared to move around, never having a permanent home, and be capable of mixing with all ranks right to the top. You were lucky, you found one, but there aren't many around. And if you've come here to lecture me, then you can stop right now. Why the devil do you think I've asked you to keep in touch with Grace? You've misinterpreted my motives towards her completely. Dan picked up their empty glasses, and if you're hinting that I could cause grief by not surviving, I can tell you now that I'm not going to die in this bloody war. Same again? George nodded and grinned as he watched his nephew order more drinks. He had done what he came here to do. It was a mystery how the two of them could have become so fond of that girl in such a short time. But she was still coping with the grief and loss of her husband. He wasn't absolutely sure what Dan's feelings were towards Grace, but alarm bells were ringing in his head. He could be completely wrong, of course, but a little warning wouldn't go amiss, and he felt very protective towards her. There you are. Dan put the drinks on the table. I hope you're not driving. I'm staying overnight. That gives us plenty of time to catch up on the rest of the news then. Do you know how James is? George took a deep breath. 2 days ago, on the 15th of September, I paid a visit to Kenley. It was the most harrowing day I've spent since Dunkirk. As soon as the planes came in to refuel, they were off again. Everything they had was flying, and there were losses each time they returned. My heart was thumping until I saw James get out of his Spitfire at the end of the day. It's bad, Dan. Those men are so tired they fall asleep anywhere. I never got a chance to say more than a few words to James. When I said I didn't think they could keep that up, James slapped me on the back and said of course they could. Then he was asleep. I left him, knowing he would start all over again at first light. They are doing a valiant job, and giving the rest of us the time needed to recover to full strength. The Luftwaffe are suffering high losses, and the daylight raids they're making on London are madness. I agree. Goring wanted to wipe our planes from the skies, but he hasn't been able to do that. Intelligence says Hitler has abandoned his plans to invade, for the time being anyway. He didn't have any choice. If he'd attempted it immediately after Dunkirk, we would have been hard pushed. We're building up our strength again, but we still need more time. George nodded, and those weary pilots are giving us the time. It mustn't be wasted. I would say he's decided to break the will of the people with these raids. It's going to take time, But Hitler will be defeated. Eventually. He has to be. The alternative is unacceptable. Agreed. Many believe that this little island, standing alone and facing the might of the enemy, can't possibly survive. They are wrong, and in that conviction we will never waver, no matter how rough it becomes. Dan lifted his glass. Let's drink to that. With Grace now in the army, Hitler doesn't stand a chance, he said, a slow smile appearing. I expect her to rise steadily up the ranks. Without any help from you. She won't need my help, George. There's a natural leader there, just waiting to be revealed. That wasn't how Grace was feeling at that moment. She was worried about being away from home with the raids going on, and the basic training. If she wasn't so tired, she would laugh. The first few days on the parade ground had been a shambles. Some didn't know their left from their right and kept marching when the rest had stopped, causing chaos and much milling around. The look on the Sergeant Major's face had been something to see. Grace thought that picture would always remain with her. 2 weeks of hard slog, and they were beginning to march without too many mistakes. 2 more weeks to go. We didn't do too badly today, did we, Grace? Peggy dropped onto her bed and stretched out with a sigh of relief. We marched like professionals. I even saw the Sergeant Major almost smile today. Almost? Yes, well, that poor man has been sorely tried. I expect he's forgotten how to smile. Don't you believe it, Grace said. They've probably been laughing at our antics in their bar every night. I'd love to know what they've been saying. Peggy laughed. We'll show 'em, though. In another 2 weeks we'll be as good as the men. Then we'll find out what job we'll be doing. What are you hoping for, Grace? I really don't know. I suppose it'll be clerical work of some kind. What about you? I'd like to be assigned to the transport division if I can. I've always been fascinated by mechanical things. Let's hope you're lucky. Grace smiled at Peggy. The frightened girl she'd met on the first day had disappeared. She'd grown in confidence and was thoroughly enjoying life in the army. A couple of the other girls were not faring so well. The rest of them had gathered round to encourage and support those struggling. The comradeship between them had grown over the 2 weeks, and Grace felt it was helping to strengthen the whole squad. She wondered if this was one of the things Dan had missed while at the War Office. He had certainly fought hard to get back to his regiment. Remembering those times brought her thoughts back to those she was separated from. Letters from her parents were cheerful, assuring her they were perfectly all right. She'd also heard from George, and he'd told her proudly that James was now a squadron leader. Like her parents, he'd made light of the bombing. In 2 weeks, she would be able to see for herself exactly how bad it was. And in 2 weeks, this group of girls who had melded together so well would be assigned to different postings. They would be saying goodbye to each other, probably never to meet again. Chapter 12. The camp gates were a welcome sight, and Dan could hear the groans of relief behind him. It had been a tough run, with heavy packs. But if the men were to endure the rigours of battle, they had to be very fit. Many of them were new recruits and had to be toughened up quickly. When he reached the parade ground, he stopped. There were still 5 men with him, and the others weren't far behind. Not one of them had dropped out, and that was an improvement. Well done, men, he said, easing the pack off his back and dropping it on the ground. Good run today, sir, the sergeant stated, watching as each man arrived and calculating their condition. Dan studied one of the soldiers who had stayed with him all the way. He was a new recruit and had only been with them for a week. You managed that well, Johnson. Thank you, sir. I reckoned if you could do it, then so could I. I watched you all the way and never let you get more than 6 paces in front of me. He grinned. I was told you were impossible to beat, so I wanted to get through the gate before you. Couldn't quite manage it, though. But I'll have you next time, sir. Cheeky sod, Dan thought, highly amused. I can see I'll have to watch you, Private. Johnson grinned again, and then hurried to take his place in the ranks of men now lined up in order. "He's a bit sure of himself, sir," the sergeant muttered. "I'll discipline him for talking to you like that. No, let it go. We'll sort him out over the next few weeks." The sergeant's mouth twitched at the corners. He'd been one of the men with Major Chester on that harrowing trek to reach Dunkirk, and had come to know and respect him. It was good to have him back. "I'll look forward to that, sir." They gave each other an amused look, and then Dan said, "You can dismiss the men now." "Yes, sir." When the men had left the parade ground, Dan lifted his pack and swung it onto his back. "Hello, Dan." He spun round and smiled with pleasure at the Major General standing there. "Stan, what a surprise. Are you going to be stationed here?" "No, I'm still at Aldershot. I came to see you." "That sounds ominous. What does the intelligence service want with me?" Stan Hayden laughed. "You know we'd like you to join us, but you're a fighting man, and it's useless trying to pry you away from your regiment. I need to discuss something with you. In private." "Right. Come to my quarters. I need to clean up, and then you can tell me what this is about." Showered and in a clean uniform, Dan made a pot of coffee, Stan's favourite beverage, and sat down. "How can I help you, Stan?" "I've been sent files of possible recruits for the intelligence service. Normally I wouldn't have even bothered to consider this one. You know I'm always doubtful about having women in my section. But there was a letter from you attached to her file. Her name is Grace Lincoln. The report from Northamptonshire and your letter told me what her qualifications are. But I'd like you to tell me what she's like as a person. Her husband was killed in France, and that worries me. Is she mentally stable and able to cope with disturbing situations without becoming emotional?" "I can say without hesitation or doubt that she can." Dan then gave Stan a detailed account of the few weeks Grace had worked for him. By the time he had finished, Stan was smiling. "She sounds as if she might be worth considering. I'm sure you would find her very useful." Dan didn't elaborate further. He'd been careful not to say anything to influence Stan's decision in any way. "I'll ask to interview her first, then, but if I have any doubts about her, I won't take her. There are others to choose from." "Of course, the final decision is yours. Will you let me know how things turn out?" "Yes, as soon as I've seen her." Stan looked at his watch. "Let's have dinner, and then I'll buy you a drink. I want to hear how you managed to get so fit again. I was told you were finished as a soldier." "You don't want to believe everything you hear?" That was an interesting visit, Dan thought, as he watched Stan drive away. Several attempts in the past had been made to move him to intelligence, but that wasn't for him. He had a strong feeling that the Major General hadn't come just to talk about Grace. He'd used that as an excuse. Stan had watched him carefully all the time he'd been here, and if he had shown the slightest sign of not having recovered completely from his injury, he would have been transferred, like it or not. He continued to watch the car disappear through the gates, and blessed those weeks he'd pushed himself to the limit to regain full mobility again. That sergeant had certainly known what he was doing, and Grace had brought some fun and quiet support. He really did wish her the very best for the future. The intelligence service might be just the thing for her. He hoped it worked out, but that would be up to Stan. "Sir?" Dan turned. "Yes, Sergeant?" "I thought you'd like to know that Johnson's bragging he'll beat you next time, and they've started a book on it." "Really? We're definitely going to have to do something about that man." Dan kept a perfectly straight face and asked, "How much have you bet?" £1 on you to win, sir." Dan removed his wallet and handed over £2 notes. "Put that on for me to win, in your name, of course." "For your pleasure, sir." Both men looked at each other and burst into laughter. "Johnson's new and doesn't know you. He doesn't realise you let some of us stay with you today. And he's cocky enough to want to get one over on an officer." "I've watched him, and he believes he's better than everyone else. We've got to make him see that he's part of a team, or he could be trouble when we're in action. That could endanger other lives. I won't have someone who's a risk under my command." If we can't calm him down, then he will have to go elsewhere. I've also come to the same conclusion, and that's why I didn't put a stop to it. I knew you'd find a way to deal with him." Dan nodded. "We'll let him swagger for a couple of days, and then we'll run his race. This might be the best way to deal with him. Don't let anyone know I'm aware of this, though." "Not a word, sir. I'm relieved to see you made a complete recovery after France." I was lucky. The bullet didn't damage anything vital. Infection and loss of blood caused the problems. And walking on it for miles, it didn't have a chance to heal. There wasn't any choice, was there? I certainly wasn't going to risk getting captured again. "Not likely, sir. When you said run, I was off as fast as I could. I still can't believe we came out of that alive. But we did, and one day we will go back." Dan's expression showed his determination. "And it will be a different story next time. In the meantime, we've got to get this lot fighting fit. Arrange a training run for 3 days' time, early morning, without packs. We'll see what kind of speed everyone has." "Yes, sir." There was a suppressed air of excitement as the men lined up. Betting had been brisk, Dan had been told, involving a lot of the camp. Those loyal to Dan had laid money on him, but others had believed Johnson's boasts. Dan wasn't happy about letting this go ahead, but felt it was the best way to deal with the situation. Putting Johnson on a charge or transferring him would only make him worse. This had to be settled today, once and for all. "We're going to take a nice 10-mile run today without packs, so you can enjoy the scenery." There was a ripple of amusement through the ranks. "It's quite warm, so remember to drink plenty of water along the way. Same route as last time. Off you go." Dan started behind everyone else, with the sergeant beside him. "What are your tactics, sir?" "I'll take it easy for the first few miles, and then gradually move forward." "Right. I'll keep the pace steady until they start to spread out. Watch Johnson. He might make a sprint for it early, hoping to leave you behind." The sergeant then went to the front to urge the men on, and Dan jogged along. He loved to run, and from a youngster he had competed regularly. Not only did he have stamina, but could muster a good turn of speed in a sprint. He might need that ability today. Johnson was good, but he was too sure of himself, and that was a mistake. Dan also suspected that he had a low opinion of officers, and if he could outrun one, it would make him feel a big man. With that kind of attitude, he would be a liability to the regiment. After 5 miles, Dan was in the middle of the group, which was now widely spread. There were a few who really struggled to finish a run, but all Dan asked was that they do their best, and showed a determination to finish. Johnson was in the front, running easily, and Dan knew he mustn't let him get too far in front of him, or he wouldn't stand a chance. He began to close in on him, to keep within sprinting distance. The gates were in sight before Dan made his move, remembering all the races he'd competed in. Johnson gasped in surprise as he passed him. It was close, but with a final spurt, Dan managed to reach the parade ground 10 yards ahead. Much to Dan's delight, the sergeant also passed Johnson at the last minute. They were just recovering their breath when a dozen more men arrived. They immediately went up to Johnson, who just shook his head, speechless. "I think that settles it, sir," the sergeant said under his breath. "I hope so." Dan took a swig from his water bottle. "I wouldn't like to try that again. I'm not as young as I used to be." "You'd never know it, sir. That was damned hard, though." He began to count the men on the parade ground. "Still 4 to come, sir." "We'll wait. I want to say a few words before the men are dismissed." 10 minutes later, the stragglers arrived. One young boy was really struggling, and the other experienced men were encouraging him on. He could hardly stand when he stopped by the sergeant. "Sorry, I'm last, sir," he gasped. I ain't no runner." Dan strode over. "Don't apologise. You have shown courage and determination to keep going even though you were suffering. Those are the qualities I look for in my men. You will make a good soldier. Well done." The young recruit straightened up, a look of surprise on his face. "Thank you, sir. Dan turned to the men, who were all listening intently, even Johnson. You will all have different talents and skills, and everyone is needed to make up an effective fighting unit. I don't give a damn who comes first or last. What I want to see is you all working together for the good of all. Like the 3 men who stayed behind to help someone who was in trouble, it's qualities like that that make a regiment strong. And I mean us to be one of the best. When he saw the nods of approval from some of the men, he turned to the sergeant. You can dismiss the men now. Later that afternoon, Dan was doing what he most disliked, paperwork, and he wished he had Grace there. She would have dealt with it in no time at all, but he didn't have that luxury now. There was a sharp rap on the door, and the sergeant marched in. He held out a wad of pound notes. Your winnings, sir. He waved it away. Arrange for the men who took part in the run today to have a beer with their evening meal. If it comes to any more, have it put on my bar bill. I'll do that, sir. What shall I tell the men? Just say it's from you, out of your winnings. The sergeant grinned. They'll never believe that. Really? Do you make their lives that much of a misery? I try, sir. Dan laughed, remembering a sergeant or two he had encountered when he'd been starting out. All right then, tell them it's from my winnings, and if any of them try to pull a stunt like that again, I'll have the whole squad on latrine duty for a month. That should do nicely, sir. Dan pushed the paperwork aside and sat back. How is Johnson taking defeat? The men are ribbing him a lot, but he seems to be taking it well and joining in the laughter. He did say he thought all officers just stood around giving orders. A couple of men who were with us in France put him right on that point. I think he'll be all right now, but I'll keep an eye on him. The next few weeks will tell us if he's going to fit in. Thank you, Sergeant. He saluted and marched out, leaving Dan to his paperwork. Chapter 13. The parade had gone off without any mistakes, and they were all feeling rather proud of themselves. Grace had loved the feeling of everyone marching in perfect time. There had been a rhythm to it, and she'd found this particularly enjoyable, making all the hard work over the last 4 weeks worth every blister. Their time at this camp was now over, and 7 days of leave lay ahead. First, though, they were each being seen and given their new postings. When Grace's name was called, she marched smartly into the interview room. Sit down, the female officer ordered. You've done well while you've been here. How do you feel about army life? I like it, Mum. She nodded and handed Grace some papers. At the end of your leave, you are to report to Major General Hayden at Aldershot Barracks. He already has your details, but give him the sealed envelope as well. What will be my assignment? That will be explained when you get there. But this is only an interview. If the Major General doesn't think you're suitable for his outfit, you are to immediately return here. You will then be given a new posting. This wasn't at all what Grace had expected, and it was most unsatisfactory. The other girls had been given definite postings. The officer looked up and actually smiled. Don't look so perplexed. We wouldn't be sending you if we didn't consider you very suitable for Major General Hayden. He's a stickler for punctuality, so make sure you arrive on time. All the information telling you where to go when you get there and the time of your appointment is in the folder. Good luck. You may go and enjoy your leave. Thank you, Mum. Grace stood up and marched out of the room to find Peggy waiting for her. What did you get? Nothing yet. I've got an interview at Aldershot after my leave. Doing what? I don't know. All I was told was that the Major General will explain when I get there. Oh, Peggy nodded. They're going to give you something special because you're clever. Grace pulled a face. The major I worked for gave me a reference. I don't know what was in it, but I have the feeling it might be causing them trouble in deciding what to do with me. I wish they'd given me some idea, though, because now it will be on my mind while I'm on leave. How did you get on? Peggy beamed. Transport, isn't that terrific? I'm so pleased you got what you wanted. So am I. And as this is our last night together, we've arranged a big party to celebrate surviving the basic training. Good. Let's forget everything and just enjoy ourselves tonight, shall we? Absolutely. The next morning, there were tearful goodbyes, as they all prepared to go their different ways. As the train chugged along, Grace reflected on the last 4 weeks. It had been hard, but there had also been a lot of laughter. Even the aching muscles and blistered feet hadn't dampened her enjoyment. She'd liked being with so many girls. It had made her realise that she had led a quiet life until then. Helen had been her friend from childhood, but apart from that, she'd worked for men and never mixed socially with the other girls at work. The last weeks were now over, and there was something new ahead of her. Though what that could be was a mystery. She was hoping for something more than being a secretary, but that was probably all they would give her. Still, as Helen had said, it was something she was good at, so she mustn't be too disappointed. She sighed and told herself to stop worrying about it. Take each day as it comes, and today she was going home. It would be lovely to see her parents again. This was the first time she'd ever been away for any length of time, and she'd missed them. She wished Helen could be there as well, but that was too much to ask. Grace had listened intently to the news reports about the bombing, but was still shocked when she saw the extent of the damage. It was a relief to see that their area was relatively unharmed, and when she turned into her road, it was lovely to see their house still standing. The moment she put her key in the front door, it was pulled open by her smiling parents. Her mother was in slacks, which was something she'd never seen before. It took her by surprise, but she didn't remark on it. "We saw you arrive," her father said as he hugged her. "Oh, it's so good to see you." Her mother held her arm's length to study her. "You're looking well. The army obviously suits you. You must be hungry after your journey." "I am," Grace agreed. "All I've had is a sandwich and a cup of tea on the way home. Come on then. We've delayed dinner in the hope you'd soon arrive. We can talk while we eat and get some food inside us before the raids start." "How bad are they?" she asked, glancing at the tin hat in the hall with ARP stamped on it. "They're coming over at night now." Her father looked at his watch. "They'll be here around 9 o'clock. "I hope you're both going to the shelters." Grace sat at the table, the smell of her mother's cooking making her realise just how hungry she was. "We do. Sometimes." "What do you mean sometimes, Mum?" Grace demanded. "It depends how close it is," her father explained. "Don't worry, we've got an Anderson shelter in the garden now, but we don't use it unless we have to. It's rather damp, and we need our Wellington boots on if we go down there. There's too much underground water here." "Waste of precious ground if you ask me," her mother said. "We could be growing vegetables on that plot." "Your safety's more important," Grace pointed out. "You're right, of course." Her mother put a plate of steaming food in front of her. "It's only a veg pie, but it is filling. It smells and looks delicious." "Eat up then," her father told her. "You'll need that inside you tonight. Once the worst of the raid's over, we go and help the rescue services. Your mother's joined the WVS, and they go out with a tea van." So that was why her mother was dressed like that. They hadn't mentioned any of this in their letters. "You've been keeping things from me. Don't look so shocked, darling." Her mother smiled sadly. "People need help. The Women's Voluntary Service is there to give a hot drink to rescuers, firemen, and those made homeless or in shock. A cup of strong tea's always a comfort." "I see." Grace shook her head. "I came home intending to persuade you to move out of London, but I'd be wasting my time, wouldn't I? We're not leaving. We'll take our chance, like everyone else. Now, eat up before the sirens go. If the bombs start to fall, we'll dive under the table." Grace stopped with her fork halfway towards her mouth and stared at her mother in disbelief. "You're not serious?" Her mother shrugged. "It will protect us from flying glass." "But not if the bloody house comes down. Language, dear. I hope you haven't picked up bad habits at that camp." "Mum, you're incredible, do you know that?" "Yes, dear. Your father's always told me I am." Ted was grinning, and when Grace caught him winking at her, she burst into laughter. "All right, I'll watch my language. So, do you think there will be a raid tonight?" "They've been coming every night. A lot of families sleep down the underground stations. especially if they've got young children. Her father finished the last of his meal and sat back with a sigh. I expect many parents are wishing they'd left their children in the country. It must have been hard to send their youngsters away to live with strangers, though. It was, Grace. Some children settled in the homes they were evacuated to, but others wanted to come back. There didn't seem to be any danger then. Jean shook her head sadly. It was the wrong thing to do. But it's easy to be wise with hindsight. Suddenly, the eerie wailing of the sirens filled the air. "Here they come," Ted said grimly. "Grace, you go to the shelter if you want to." "Not without you," she told them firmly. "If I were you, darling, I'd change out of that smart uniform. Slacks would be better." "All right, Mum. I've got my army slacks with me. They'll be more comfortable." Grace grabbed her bag and dashed upstairs to change as quickly as she could. The drone of bombers approaching could already be heard. It only took a couple of minutes, and she was back with her parents. They were sitting at the kitchen table, and Ted was shuffling a pack of cards. "What now?" she asked, sitting down. "We wait and play pontoon." Ted began to deal the cards. "Quite often a plane comes in first and drops markers over the target. I've been out and had a look, and it looks like it might be the East End again." "Poor devils." Jean picked up her cards. Grace did the same. There was a feeling of unreality to be sitting here like this as the guns opened fire on the raiders. If the majority of people were showing the same fortitude, then there was no way Hitler was going to force this country into submission. She lost track of time as the bombs whistled down, and a couple of times the house shook and they dived under the table. Then they crawled out and continued their game of cards. It was the most frightening and extraordinary experience she'd ever encountered. When at last the all clear sounded, they went outside and Grace gasped in horror. The sky was red, like a sunrise. London was burning. "I've got to go, Grace," Ted told her, already moving towards the door. "The rescue services are going to need all the help they can get." "I'm coming with you." She fell into step with her father as he collected his tin hat and hurried out of the front door. "What's Mum going to do?" "She'll be with the WVS on the T-van." "You didn't tell me any of this in your letters," she complained. "What would you have done if we had told you?" "Worry?" "Exactly. That's why we didn't say anything. We can't sit back and do nothing any more than you can." "No, of course you can't," she admitted, as they reached a group of men at the far end of the road. Many were in uniforms of the various rescue services. Some were neighbours she knew well, including Helen's father, and there were men obviously on leave like herself. It was a mixture, but one thing was clear. They all wanted to help. An old bus trundled up and they all managed to squeeze in, and it wasn't long before they reached a roadblock. They walked the rest of the way, clambering over and round smouldering debris. The next 2 hours were spent searching for anyone who might be buried under the rubble. It was light when Grace's father tapped her on the shoulder. "That's all we can do here. Time to call it a night." She straightened up, numb with fatigue. "Did you find anyone?" "2. Dead, I'm afraid." He took her arm. "Come on, the bus is waiting." "I haven't seen Mum." "She'll be down at the docks, I expect." That first night set the pattern of the rest of Grace's leave, air raids at night and sleeping when they could. She worried about leaving her parents to that hell, but knew that no amount of pleading would make them leave London. It hadn't been a restful leave, but at least she knew what the Blitz was really like, and how involved her parents were. It was worrying, but she was proud of them, and everyone was labouring to keep everything going. No one was getting much sleep, but after each raid, the people were making their way to work, determined to get there any way they could, despite the destruction. Life went on a day at a time. Grace finished packing her bag and sat on the bed, running her hands over the cover. She hadn't spent much time in this room, which was just as well. She was moving on, as Brian would have wanted. But she missed him so much. They'd been childhood sweethearts, and there had never been anyone else for Grace. Would the pain ever go? She wiped away a single tear and stood up. The things she had seen and done over the last week had made her emotional, and that would not do. Dawn was lighting the sky. Her next day was here, and she had orders to follow. Chapter 14. Grace hadn't given a thought to what awaited her at Aldershot, but she would soon find out, she thought, as she was escorted to a waiting room. There were 3 others waiting to be interviewed, and Grace was the only woman. Whatever this was about, she didn't think her chances were good. The men waiting didn't look like secretaries. They were all late 20s to early 30s with upper-class accents, and not a private among them. Each interview lasted at least half an hour, and she studied the faces as they returned and sat down again. They all looked confident. It had been a long wait, as she was the last to be called. The Major General was a distinguished man, around 6 feet, greying slightly at the temples, with piercing blue eyes. She felt his scrutiny and knew he would remember every detail about her. "In the next room, Private Lincoln, there is a German pilot who was shot down over London. I want you to talk to him and see if you can get any useful information out of him. He doesn't speak English." He handed her a pen and pad. "Make a note of everything he tells you." This was the last thing she'd expected, and for a moment the shock paralysed her. A mental picture of the destruction and suffering she'd just seen filled her thoughts. The Major General was still studying her. "Say if you're not up to it." He'd spoken sharply, and that snapped her back. With a touch of anger in her voice, she said, "I relish the chance to meet him, sir." She opened the door, stepped inside and closed it softly behind her. First, she took in the room, noting where everything was, and then turned her attention to the man sitting at the table. He was handsome, with fine, chiselled features, sandy-coloured hair and hazel eyes. Grace smiled and sat opposite him, not saying a word. Something was nagging at her, but she couldn't see what it was. She made a few notes in shorthand on the pad, and then looked up, smiling again. For about 10 minutes, she talked to him, making detailed notes of their conversation. And then it hit her. She was furious with herself for not spotting it sooner. "You have had a long day," she said sweetly. "Would you like a cup of tea?" When he nodded, she stood up. "I'll have one sent in to you." With her hand on the door, she switched to English. "Don't ever take up acting as a profession. You'd starve." The astonished look on his face made her day worthwhile. "How did you get on?" the officer asked. "It's all here." Grace handed him the pad and watched him frown. "Don't worry if you can't read shorthand, sir. Apart from my assessment of the situation, there isn't anything there you don't already know. The officer in there would like a cup of tea. He's had a tiring few hours, and I'm sure he'd like to change into his own uniform. Oh, and it would be wise to remove that wristwatch before doing this again. It's English." The frown disappeared, and was replaced by surprise. "Did that give him away?" "It was a series of small things. I was suspicious straight away by the absence of a guard in the room. I hardly think you would send a woman in with a prisoner without some protection. In my work for a lawyer, I met all types: guilty, innocent, liars, violent men, and even killers. Your German fooled me for a while, but not for long. Do I have your permission to leave now, sir?" "No, you do not. Go and wait outside." The 3 men smiled rather smugly when Grace stormed out, clearly annoyed. "It looks as if that didn't go well," one remarked. "Oh, it went very well. I just don't like being taken for a fool. That charade was unnecessary." They all looked puzzled, but didn't pursue the subject. "Where's that tea I was promised?" "I'm not so sure you deserve one. What the hell happened in there, Bill?" The man, leaning casually against the open door, gave an amused chuckle. "I put on my best performance for her. But she saw through my deception. She even had the cheek to tell me not to take up acting as a profession. You'd think, having spent some of my childhood in Germany, I'd be able to convince her I was really a German pilot. And don't be fooled. behind that lovely face there's a sharp, analytical mind. And her German's good, by the way. Stan nodded. She worked with Dan Chester for a while, and I suspect he's been coaching her. He speaks it like a native. She's the only one who realised I wasn't German. What are you going to do? Bill asked, walking over to the desk and picking up the notebook. As he read, he began to laugh. I'd forgotten you can read shorthand. What does it say? Believe me, Stan, you don't want to know. She does not have a very high opinion of our method of interviewing a prospective secretary. I like her, and would say she's the right person for intelligence work. I know. Damn it! Stan gazed out of the window for long moments. It's going to cause complication if we take her. There will be some situations we can't send her into. Agreed. But she could still be more useful than the other candidates we saw. She can be my secretary while we see what she's capable of. No, she bloody well can't. You can forget that idea. Captain Reed. Bill tried to look hurt. Anyone would think you don't trust me. I don't. If she was a plain unattractive woman, it would be different, but she isn't. Take one of the men, then. Stan shook his head. Not one of them spotted the deception, so that leaves us with the most suitable candidate. A woman. And get out of that blasted uniform. If you wander around in it, you'll get arrested or shot. Don't take your bad mood out on me, Major General. This exercise was your idea. If you're dead against working with a woman, why did you agree to see her? I was curious. Here, read this letter from Chester. There was silence while Bill read through the letter, and then he lifted his head. Is this the Major Chester you keep trying to have transferred to us? Stan nodded. As I've said, she worked for him while he was at the War Office. Bill whistled through his teeth. She speaks fluent French as well, and is a qualified driver. Take her, Stan. If she doesn't work out, you can always have her transferred. I don't think you have a choice. You're right. Stan called the duty corporal in. Tell the 3 men they can go, and bring the woman in here. Yes, sir. This was taking a long time. If they didn't dismiss her soon, she wouldn't be able to get back to Northamptonshire today. Perhaps they'd let her stay overnight. It was a shame, because Aldershot wasn't too far from London, and she might have been able to get home more often. Any hope of a posting here had gone the moment she'd seen through their bit of theatre. She'd been cross and had shown it, unfortunately. If they had wanted to find out how good her German was, all they'd needed to do was give her a proper test. And why was that so important? What section of the army was this? The uniform badges were unfamiliar to her. The duty corporal came over and told them they could go, and Grace stood up, intent on leaving. You are not dismissed, the soldier told her. You're to come with me. She was escorted back to the office. When she walked in, the pretend German stepped forward and bowed gracefully. Captain William Reed at your service, Private Lincoln. There was such an air of devilment about him, and her irritation instantly disappeared. Captain Reed didn't look as if he took anything seriously, though that was probably an act, she suspected. She couldn't help laughing and joining in his game. It's a pleasure to meet the real you, sir. The pleasure's all mine. He grinned, showing a row of perfect white teeth. Now, if you will excuse me, I have to change out of this uniform. The Major General thinks I'll get shot if seen wandering around in it, though I suspect he would like to shoot me himself for failing to convince you that I was a German. If you don't get out of here now, that is a distinct possibility, Captain. Yes, sir. Bill opened the door, turned and winked at Grace, then disappeared. When she turned back to the Major General, there was a smile on his face. Ah, she thought, he has a sense of humour. Thank goodness. That is the first time anyone has caught him out. You do this often then, do you, sir? We've found it the most effective way to find out quickly if a person's suitable for this kind of work. And what work is that, sir? Grace was sure she was going to be reprimanded and sent away, so she wanted to know why she was here. There would be a black mark on her record after this anyway. He didn't answer the question. Instead, he asked, Did you like working for Major Chester? It was interesting, sir. His mouth twitched at the corners. No doubt. There was a rap on the door, and the corporal came in, carrying a tray of tea. Would you like a cup of tea? He asked when the soldier had left. No, thank you, sir. I can get one on the train. Now she was puzzled. Why was this officer offering her tea? He looked up sharply. Where do you think you're going? I've been told to report back to Northamptonshire for another posting. Why do you need another posting? Because I've messed this one up, she told him bluntly. What makes you think so? I didn't do what I was supposed to, and I spoke my mind when I discovered the German was a fake, sir. I admit that in most units that would have immediately disqualified you, but not in this case. We are looking for different qualities. Pour the tea for us and sit down. Whether you like the way we do things or not, you have your posting, a decision I could live to regret, and if you mess up, you'll be out of here very quickly. Grace, stunned by this announcement, set about pouring the tea without commenting. What could she say? He obviously didn't want her, so what on earth was going on here? The captain swept in. Ah, the tea I was promised. Any biscuits? He sounded just like Dan, and she smiled at the captain. Digestive or custard cream, sir? Both, please. I see he has you working already. Private Lincoln was under the impression she'd failed our little test bill. The smile was there when he took the tea from her. Not a chance. After serving both the officers, she took her own tea and sat down, as ordered. You obviously don't have any idea why you've been sent to us or what branch of the service we are. The Major General sat back, watching her carefully. I wasn't told anything, sir. I assumed it was for secretarial work. You will officially be classed as my secretary, of course. Our main task, though, is to gain information. Anything that will tell us what the enemy is planning, or an insight into his strengths and weaknesses. We are part of the intelligence service, and we need people who can sift the wheat from the chaff, so to speak. You have shown that ability, and your other languages could be useful. Now she understood what that test had been about, but it still seemed a strange way to decide on someone's suitability for this unit. She was surprised that she was being given such an opportunity. I'm taking you against my better judgment, but as of this moment you are attached to the intelligence service. If you're not happy, and will apply for a transfer, I want to know. Now. I will not do that, sir. He nodded. As far as anyone is concerned, you are the secretary of an officer. You have already signed the Secrets Act, so I don't need to remind you never to talk about the work we do here. I understand perfectly, sir. As you will be the only female in this outfit, you will be given quarters in a house on the edge of the camp. You will be on call, day or night. And if you're sent for, I expect you to come immediately. Keep a small kit bag packed should we have to travel. Yes, sir. I wouldn't normally take a woman with us. That could present problems. He paused, studying her reaction with his usual scrutiny, as if he was reading her mind. I'm taking a chance with you, however. I made extensive inquiries regarding the time you worked for Major Chester, and I understand he dragged you through mock battles with the Home Guard, hiding in muddy ditches and getting filthy. On one occasion, he even manhandled you over an army assault course, and I was told that you did all this without complaint. That is correct, sir. Grace fought to keep a straight face when she noticed the captain's amused expression. The assault course was a celebration. I just passed my driving test, and Major Chester was once again fully fit. A celebration for which one of you? The captain laughed. Both of us, sir. And as this was the end of our time of working together, we wanted to finish with laughter. Remarkable. I would really like to meet this Major, Stan. I'll introduce you if we come across him. He turned his attention back to Grace. Do you still see Chester? No, sir. Our association ended when he returned to his regiment. The Major General nodded, and then stood up. The soldier on duty outside will show you to your quarters. Dump your gear, have a meal, and then return here. You have 2 hours. Grace stood up and saluted smartly. 2 hours. Understood, sir. Chapter 15. It had been 5 months since Grace had been able to get home, and her parents were overjoyed to see her. "I'm sorry I couldn't get leave over Christmas and the New Year," she told them. "I would have loved to welcome in 1941 with you, but we did have a celebration at the base. We survived 1940 without an invasion, thanks to our pilots, and that's a relief for everyone." "It certainly is. And we missed you too, darling, but you must be very busy working for such a high-ranking officer. He relies on you a lot, I expect." Grace nodded and smiled at her mother, being careful not to show her frustration. She had anticipated unusual and even exciting work after what had been said at the interview, but that hadn't happened. She'd been kept in the background, and much of her duty had been routine. The men had disappeared from time to time and never took her with them. If this continued, she would have to put in for a transfer, but she was really reluctant to do so. It would have been admitting defeat, and she didn't like doing that. "You didn't tell us you'd been promoted," her father said, with a touch of pride in his voice. 2 stripes. Grace pulled her face. "I've only just been given the stripes, and I haven't done anything to deserve them." "You're too modest, darling. I'm sure you're invaluable. The General must think so, or he wouldn't have promoted you." "Major General, Mother," she corrected. "Whatever you say, dear." Her mother smiled broadly. "We've got some good news for you. Can you guess what it is?" The war's over?" Her parents laughed, and Ted said, "Helen's coming home on leave in 2 days' time." "That's wonderful. I'll be able to see her because I've got 7 days." That news cheered her up. It had been ages since they'd seen each other, and she happily spent the rest of the day with her parents catching up on all the news. The raids weren't every night now, and everyone was grateful for the respite, however short it might be. Helen arrived a day earlier than expected, and once they were together they couldn't stop talking. It was as if they hadn't been apart for months. "What shall we do tonight?" Helen asked. "Don't you want to spend it with your family? You haven't seen them for ages." Helen shook her head. "They've told me to go off and enjoy myself. I've only got 3 days, and I want to have some fun." "Don't you have any fun where you're stationed?" Grace asked. "It's all pretty serious most of the time. What about you? Do you get a lot of laughs in your job?" Grace pulled her face. "You're right, we both need a light-hearted night of fun. So what can we do?" "There's someone here to see you, Grace," her mother called up the stairs. "Oh dear, I hope I'm not being ordered back. Come on, let's see what this is about." Jean was standing at the bottom of the stairs, smiling happily. "I've put them in the front room." "Uh-oh, officers," Helen whispered. "Well, it can't be Dan or George, because Mum would have taken them straight into the kitchen." End of CD 4. CD 5. When Grace opened the door and stepped in, she stared in amazement at the 2 men standing there. One she'd never seen before, but the other she knew very well. "Squadron Leader Meredith!" she exclaimed. "How lovely to see you!" He laughed, stepping forward to take her hands in his. "And it's lovely to see you, Grace. The other one standing there with a big grin on his face is Tim. I hope you don't mind us descending upon you like this." "You're both very welcome." She pulled Helen forward. "This is my friend, Helen." With the introductions over, Jean came in with a tray of tea and homemade cake, and then left them alone again. "Would you girls like to come dancing with 2 lonely pilots tonight?" Tim asked. "Lonely? Now that is hard to believe," Helen said, laughing. "Sad, but true. We expected to have to share one beautiful girl, but it's terrific to find 2 of you. Absolute stunners as well." Tim grinned. "We'd better do something classy tonight, James." "They haven't said they'll come with us yet." Tim stepped forward and bowed low gracefully. "Please?" "Where did you find such a charmer?" Helen wanted to know. "On my wing, and once on the ground I can't seem to get rid of him." James smiled at Tim, making the strong bond between them obvious. "But we're serious about wanting you to come dancing with us. What do you say?" "Well, we were just wondering what to do to have some fun tonight," weren't we, Helen? We were, and dancing with two dishy pilots sounds like fun to me. Great. We'll pick you up at 7. We'll be ready. Now, please sit down and finish the tea and cake, or my mother will be offended. Can't have that. Tim dived for the cake. I'm starving, and this looks delicious. Well, well, Helen said when they'd gone. You never told me your boss looked like that. I always thought he was a boring middle-aged man. Really? Grace laughed at her friend's rapt expression. Tim's rather attractive as well, isn't he? Helen did a little jig. Pity we haven't got fancy evening dresses, but I guess uniforms will have to do. Everyone will be in uniform. We'd look out of place in ball gowns. We've got 2 hours, and so I'm off to wash my hair. See you at 7. Grace watched her friend run out of the room, showing the exuberance of carefree days before the war came and changed all their lives. Tonight, 2 hard-pressed pilots needed to relax and enjoy themselves, and so did 2 troubled army girls. And there was no denying it. Whatever Helen was doing, she wasn't finding it easy, no matter how she tried to hide it. As for herself, well, she'd been excited at the chance to work for the intelligence service. But it had been day after day of frustration. The Major General had pushed her into the background and was keeping her there. She felt useless. Grace? Her mother looked in the room. They told me they'd come to ask you out, so there's hot water if you want to get ready. I knew you'd be pleased to see James again. I was, and thanks, Mum. Did you know he was on leave? No, I haven't seen or heard from him since the party at the Savoy last year. I was surprised to see him. We were only ever boss and secretary. We never mixed socially. I wonder how he knew I was on leave. He said Colonel Askew told him. Oh, I see. You girls go out and enjoy yourselves. And let's hope we have a quiet night. They were ready and waiting when the men arrived in a powerful sports car. Where did you get this? Helen wanted to know, as Tim held the door open for them. We borrowed it. Does the owner know? Grace asked, as she settled in the front seat with James. Both pilots laughed, but didn't answer the question. They were taken to a club in Piccadilly, and when Grace saw it, she said, They won't let us in here. It looks like a private club. Yes, they will, Tim told them confidently, guiding them towards the entrance. The doorman took one look at the wings on their uniforms and opened the door at once. Good evening, sirs. See the manager and he'll give you one of the best tables. The place had appeared quite small from the outside, but that was deceptive. It was huge and packed. A man hurried up to them and led them to a table near the band and on the edge of the dance floor. A bottle of champagne arrived immediately, and the waitress smiled. Good evening, sirs. The manager said your first drink is on the house. What service, Helen laughed. You must have been here before. First time, James told her. Grace looked at the pilots with fresh eyes. They were being shown respect and gratitude for what they had done, and were still doing, in saving this country from invasion. They took to the air, time after time, not knowing if they would come back. After enjoying their first drink, they took to the dance floor. Grace partnered James, and it seemed strange to be dancing with the man who had been her boss. This battle-hardened pilot was nothing like the lawyer she'd worked for, though. He had changed, and that wasn't surprising. None of them were going to come out of this the same. Have you seen Dan? James asked, breaking her train of thought. Not since we left the War Office. Why? I just wondered. From what I've heard, you got on well together. We did, just as you and I got on well together as boss and secretary. Ah, he smiled. He hasn't tried to get in touch with you then? No, why should he? What are you getting at, James? Is he all right? He's fine. I was curious, that's all. Grace shook her head, remembering that the Major General had asked the same question. If you're thinking there might have been more than work between us, then I can soon put that right. Dan was injured, angry and frustrated. I had lost the husband I loved. We helped each other through a difficult time, and then we went our separate ways. End of story. As you are so curious about my private life, where's your steady girlfriend tonight? She was furious about me joining the Air Force, so she went off and married someone else. Oh, I'm so sorry, James. Don't be. I'm not. He smiled down at her. Now we've got that out of the way, let's forget everything and enjoy ourselves. It looks as if Tim's really taken to Helen. The evening was the most relaxed and enjoyable Grace had spent since the death of Brian, almost a year ago. Tim and James kept them laughing with jokes and stories. The war was put to one side for a few hours, and this was something they all needed. There wasn't even an air raid that night to spoil their fun. It was 2 o'clock in the morning when they finally arrived back home. The pilots hugged and thanked Grace and Helen for making the evening so enjoyable, and then drove away, heading for their base in Kenley. Brian had been killed in May 1940, and when that month arrived, Grace was feeling particularly low in spirit. There had not been any improvement in the job, and she was feeling useless. She was trying to take each day as it came in the hope that she would be given something more responsible to do, but she was beginning to despair that would ever happen. Surely the Major General trusted her by now. She didn't want to spend the rest of the war like this. There wasn't even enough work to keep her occupied during the day. While she'd been at the War Office, there hadn't been a moment to spare, and that was the way she liked it. Grace smiled, remembering the days she'd followed that dynamic man through muddy fields, getting filthy and loving every minute. It had been just what she'd needed at that time, as she had struggled with the pain of loss. With a sigh, she picked up the book she was reading. An early night was the thing to do. "Wake up!" Grace was being shaken and she sat bolt upright, still fuzzy from sleep. The woman in charge of the house was standing by the bed. "You are to report to your office immediately and take your bag with you." "What time is it?" Grace shook her head, trying to clear it. 5 in the morning. Hurry, the summons sounded urgent. They've sent transport for you." Springing into action, Grace tumbled out of bed, dressed with speed, ran a hand through her hair, grabbed her bag and rushed out to the waiting car. "That was quick," Captain Reed remarked when she arrived. "I was told it was urgent." "Let's move then," the Major General ordered. "We have a long journey ahead of us. You sit in the front, Lincoln." "Yes, sir." Grace did as ordered, assuming that the two officers needed to talk during the journey. They hadn't told her where they were going, and she knew better than to ask. They were dropped off at a railway station Grace had never been to before, and as all the signs had been removed in case of invasion, she wasn't sure where they were. At a guess, she would have said it was King's Cross. Even this early in the morning, it was busy. When the train arrived, she followed the officers to a private compartment. Once in, the captain closed the door, and even though the train was crowded, they had it to themselves. The men looked edgy and excited. Grace was curious to know what this was all about, but they weren't volunteering any information, and she didn't ask. It was, indeed, a long journey, and Grace occupied her time by watching the passing countryside, trying to guess where they were. One of the bags the men had brought with them contained flasks of tea and packets of sandwiches. This was very welcome, as there hadn't been time for breakfast. When they finally arrived at their destination, there was an army car waiting at the station for them. As soon as they drove out the station and into the countryside, Grace knew where she was. Scotland. It was late in the day when they reached their destination. It was a large building, bristling with activity. "You won't be needed tonight. I'll send for you in the morning," the Major General told her. "You'll be shown to your room." Grace watched the officers walk away and gave a slight shake of her head. She wasn't going to be given even a hint of what they were doing there, or what was expected of her. Ah well, that was nothing unusual in this job. A woman in civilian clothes came up to her smiling. "Welcome. If you'll come with me, I'll show you to your room. Dinner will be at 8. "Thank you. I'm very hungry after such a long journey. Where's the dining room?" "It's the first room on our right. Don't go to the next one along. That's for the officers." They walked up the winding staircase, and Grace took in every detail of the place. It was old, but very elegant. "Is this a hotel?" she asked. "It was until the army took it over. I was offered the job of staying on and running the place." You worked here then? No. The middle-aged woman gave a grim smile. My family have owned it for several generations. It has been our business and our home. We will get it back when the army no longer need it. This must be very hard for you. Sacrifices have to be made in this war, and at least this has been commandeered for officers. Yes, indeed. Grace knew only too well what it was like to make sacrifices. Here we are. You'll be sharing because we haven't enough rooms. When Grace stepped inside the room, she stopped in amazement when she saw the girl already there. They stared at each other for a moment, not able to believe their eyes. Grace! Peggy leapt to her feet and threw her arms around Grace. How wonderful! What are you doing here? I really don't know, she laughed. It's good to see you again. How are you getting on? Terrific. I'm driving the top brass around. This place is heaving with them. Do you know what's going on? Sorry, I haven't been told a thing. Never mind. Peggy did a little jig of pleasure. Let them get on with it, whatever it is they're doing. We've got a lot of catching up to do. After a good wash and change of clothes, Grace felt a whole lot better. Meeting Peggy again had lifted her spirits. They were the only two women there, so they had the dining room to themselves. They talked non-stop right through the meal, and in their room until the early hours. Although she hadn't been told what time she would be needed, Grace was downstairs early. When they decided they needed her, she would be waiting and ready. It was 10 o'clock before the officers arrived, by the front door, shaking rain off their hats. The captain smiled in a distracted way when he saw her. It's pouring out there. Good morning, sirs. I didn't know what time you might need me, so I stayed down here where you could find me. What are your orders for the rest of the day, sir? Collect your bag and be back here in 30 minutes. We're going back to Aldershot. Yes, sir. She spun round and walked up the stairs. Whatever they'd been doing, it obviously hadn't been successful. The Major General was in a bad mood and had spoken sharply, showing his irritation. It was a shame they were leaving so soon, she thought, as she hastily packed her bag. This was the first time she'd been to Scotland and would have liked to see a little of the countryside. She'd also hoped to have more time with Peggy. Peggy was out, so Grace left a note for her, picked up her bag and went downstairs where the officers were already waiting. The captain smiled apologetically at her. This has been a waste of time for you, hasn't it? No, it hasn't, sir. A girl I met at training camp is the driver to one of the officers here. It was good to see her again, and we've had a lovely time. I'm glad someone has, Stan muttered, still clearly not a happy man. The journey back was long and tedious. Although it was late when the driver dropped them off at the office, Grace made a much-needed cup of tea. Sensing they weren't going to discuss anything in front of her, she asked, Do you need me any more tonight, sir? If you have notes, I'd be happy to type them up for you now. There isn't anything urgent. You may go. Very well. Good night, sirs. As Grace walked back to her digs, she puzzled over the officer's obvious dislike of her. He'd made it clear that he didn't want a woman working with him. But if he'd felt so strongly, then why did he accept her instead of one of the men? She'd been careful to always be cheerful and helpful, never complaining or being insubordinate. She usually got on well with anyone she'd worked for in the past, so what was wrong? Was he trying to make her put in for a transfer? She shook her head. That didn't make sense. But if by some chance that was his intention, then he was wasting his time. She was staying. That was disappointing. Stan ran a hand over his eyes. A mad dash to get there and we got nothing. There had been no need to call us there in such a hurry. What did Rudolf Hess really think he would accomplish with that ridiculous peace offer? It's crazy, and Hitler will be furious because I can't imagine he would sanction Hess coming here. Stan smiled for the first time that day. There is that to be grateful for, I suppose. You are treating that girl very badly, Bill said, changing the subject. If you are hoping she'll go of her own accord, then you're going to be disappointed. I don't believe she's the type to run from a challenge. With her qualifications, any other officer would snap her up. We're lucky to have her, Stan. You're right. Stan gave a wry smile. I thought I was being so clever. When I saw that letter from Dan Chester and paid him a visit, I was intrigued. He was careful not to influence my decision in any way and gave me only the facts concerning her abilities. It was only when I spoke to others I discovered that their relationship might be closer, and I thought it might be a way to entice him over to us. I was wrong on all counts." Bill stared at Stan in astonishment. "I know you've always wanted him here, but that was never going to happen. When Grace went to work for him, her husband had been killed in France only a few weeks previously. She would have been coping with her grief, so anything more than liking and friendship between them would have been impossible. I didn't know that at the time. Chester never mentioned it, and neither did anyone else." Bill was shaking his head. "You obviously didn't look into her background enough, and it's not like you to make such a blunder. Now you've got to accept that she was the best candidate for this job and give her a chance." "I know," Stan sighed and changed the subject. "Now I have another matter to discuss with you. Do you think you could pass yourself off as a German pilot?" "As long as Grace isn't around," he joked. "What do you want me to do? Go into a prisoner of war camp as a downed pilot? They might talk freely to one of their own." When Bill began to speak, Stan held up his hand to stop him. "Before you answer, let me finish. I know you've mingled with prisoners before, but that was only for a day. We're asking you to stay there, and only the commander will know who you really are. We think there are 1 or 2 Nazis in the camp who are causing problems, but no one's talking, and we don't know who they are. It could be dangerous, very dangerous." "Where is this place?" "Somerset. Nice part of the country. When do I get captured?" "After the next big raid. Once in the camp, you'll be on your own, Bill. This isn't an order. You're quite at liberty to refuse." "If it isn't an order, then I volunteer for the mission." Chapter 16. His damned phone never stopped ringing, Dan thought, as he strode into the office and grabbed the offending instrument. "Chester?" "Oh, hello, George. I'm busy at the moment. Can I call you back?" "I've got some bad news, Dan. James has been shot down over the channel, and we don't know if he's dead or alive." "Oh, hell." Dan sat on the edge of the desk and bowed his head in shock. Are they searching for him? He might still be alive. Have his parents been told? "Not yet. James evidently left instructions that I was to be notified first. I don't want to tell his family until I have some definite news." "No, you're right." Dan was having trouble grasping the fact that he might never see his lifelong friend again, and he could hear that his uncle was very upset. People were being killed all the time, but somehow you never thought it was going to happen to you. "Let me know the moment you hear anything." "I will." He put the phone down, and when he looked up, his sergeant was standing in the doorway. He beckoned him in. "What is it, Sergeant?" "I've got news you must hear, sir." He was excited enough to make him drop his military bearing. "Hitler's invaded Russia. It's all round the camp, and the officers are coming from all directions. They're gathering in the strategy room for a meeting. I've been sent to tell you, sir. What a damn foolish thing to do." "If that's true, then it is absolute madness on Hitler's part," Dan declared, heading for the door. "Oh, Sergeant, get someone to listen for my phone. If Colonel Askew phones, they're to come and get me immediately, no matter where I am." "Yes, sir, I'll come myself." As Dan marched through the camp, his mind was assessing the implications of this astonishing news. To hear about this, on top of being told that James was missing, had come like body blows. "James," he thought angrily, "you better still be alive, and in one piece, or I swear I'll kill you myself. You bloody fool. You had to go and fly planes when you could have stayed in the comfort of your office with Grace. And you needn't think I'm going to tell her." He shook his head to clear it of such daft thoughts and swung into the meeting room. Later that evening, while he was having a drink in the officers' bar, he was called to the phone. He was dreading the news his uncle might have. "Have they found James, George?" "Yes, and apart from a couple of broken ribs, a dislocated shoulder and a prolonged dip in the sea, he's in reasonable condition." "Thank God!" Dan exclaimed with relief. "Where have they taken him?" "The military hospital in Aldershot. Grace is stationed there, so I'll try and see her while I'm there. It will only be a quick visit because this place is in uproar after today's news." "I'm not surprised. Everyone is dumbfounded at the lunacy of this move by Hitler. We'll talk about it later, George. You get off to see James and tell him I'll come tomorrow." "I'll do that, Dan." Dan put the phone down and took a deep breath before ordering another drink. What a day. The non-aggression pact between Germany and Russia hadn't meant a thing to Hitler. In his opinion, the German leader had made a monumental blunder, but only time would show what kind of an impact this would have on the war. The best news he'd had today was that James had been found alive. He would sleep tonight after all. "That was a damn stupid thing to do, James," Dan declared as he walked up to his friend's bed. James turned his head and glared at the tall man standing beside him. "You're a fine one to talk. And what are you still doing here? I thought they would have sent you to where the fighting is by now." Dan grinned, pulled up a chair and sat down. He recognised the symptoms of anger and grief smouldering under the surface, and knew just what to do. "So, what happened?" "If you've come here to ask stupid questions, then I'm going to sleep." When James closed his eyes and turned his head away, Dan watched him for a moment, and then said quietly, "I'm not going away, James, so you might as well tell me what's troubling you." "That damned fool had to go and chase him." James didn't open his eyes. "He swooped down when I was in the water and then took off in hot pursuit of the one who shot me down." "Who was this idiot?" Dan asked, prompting to keep his friend talking. He opened his eyes then, showing his anguish. "Tim! He was heading straight for the French coast, and he hasn't returned. He didn't have enough petrol to pull a stunt like that." "Did he have enough to reach the coast?" "Just." "What's his full name?" "Timothy Sheldon. He shouldn't have risked his life like that, Dan." "Perhaps not, but it was his choice, James. In the heat of battle, you sometimes have to make a snap decision, regardless of the risks. You might have done the same thing if he'd been the one in the sea, instead of you." "You're right, of course," James sighed. "Thanks, Dan. Your usual clear thinking has helped. I've been feeling so bloody angry." "I know exactly what it's like. When I got back from France and they gave me a desk job, I was ready to explode. Then this girl arrived who organised the office with calm efficiency. She didn't fuss or ask questions. She just got on with whatever I asked her to do. When I found out that her husband had been killed only a few weeks previously, I marvelled at her composure and courage. It made me realise that riling against what had happened was a waste of energy and would accomplish nothing. "Take each day as it comes," she told me. "Ah," James smiled for the first time. "Grace." Dan nodded. "She's stationed here, you know. George was going to let her know I'm here. Why don't you go and see her, Dan?" "No. We parted friends, and that's the end of it. I have no intention of seeing her again." James gave his friend a speculative glance. "No ties, eh? Thinking you might get killed, are you?" "After France, I'm not so certain of my immortality." "I know what you mean. I've had a few near shaves, but I really thought I was a goner this time." James gave a quiet chuckle. "Grace always said that lightning doesn't strike twice. If that's true, then she won't be made a widow a second time in this war, so perhaps I should increase my chances of surviving by marrying her." Dan stretched out his long legs and grinned, pleased to see his friend more relaxed. "Do you think she would have you?" "Not a chance. She's far too sensible to marry again so soon, if she ever will. I met her husband a couple of times, and they were very much in love. They'd been childhood sweethearts, and I don't think in her mind that anyone else could replace him." "That's the impression I got," Dan agreed. "Anyway, we both made it through this time. So what do you think about Hitler invading Russia?" For the next hour, they talked, until James was having a job to keep his eyes open. Dan stood up just as a nurse appeared. "You must leave now, Major. Squadron Leader Meredith must rest." "I'm going, nurse." He smiled down at his friend. "I'll see if I can find out what happened to Tim, James." "Thanks, Dan. Come again, when you can." "I will. Sleep well and get your strength back. You're strong, and the bones should heal quickly." Although it was late when Dan arrived back at camp, he phoned his uncle to tell him that James was fretting over his lost pilot friend, Tim. "Well done for finding that out about him, Dan. He wouldn't talk to me about it. I'm tied up with meetings at the moment, So could you phone the commander of Kenley to find out if there's any news about Tim? I know Peter Harrison well, so mention my name when you speak to him. I'll do that first thing in the morning. Get some rest, George. You sound tired. I am. Let me know how you get on. Good night, Dan. Night, George. Tim followed the two men as they moved stealthily through the darkened village. They made faster progress after reaching the open countryside, and soon reached an isolated farm. They pushed him through the door of the building, shut the door, and bolted it securely. When the lamps were turned up, it took Tim a moment or two to adjust to the sudden light. There were 5 other people in the room, an elderly husband and wife, and 2 young men who were probably their sons. When Tim's gaze rested on the other person, he gasped, not being able to believe his eyes. Helen? Hello, Tim. Are you hurt at all? A few bruises, that's all. What are you doing here? I'm working with the resistance. We're going to try and get you back to England. You must never tell anyone you saw me here. Do you understand that? I won't say a word, I promise. No one knows what I'm doing, not even my family and friends. They receive letters from me, so as far as they are concerned, I'm still in England. Everything is arranged to keep it that way. If I'd known it was you arriving tonight, I would have disappeared until you'd been moved on. The damage is done now, and I have to trust you never to speak about this meeting. I understand perfectly just how dangerous this is for you. I will never breathe a word of this. She nodded, said something he couldn't understand to the others, and he saw them relax. He was now wishing he'd paid more attention to French lessons at school. His limited knowledge was not enough to cope with this. Are you hungry? Starving. The entire group sat around the large scrubbed wooden table, and the woman served them with bowls of stew and chunks of homemade bread. Tim was so hungry, it tasted like the best meal he'd ever had in his life, and the woman smiled when he tucked into a second bowl. He was then taken to a derelict-looking barn, where there was a concealed cubbyhole filled with straw and items for his need while in there. Helen told him he was to stay there, and not come out until someone came for him. How are you going to get me back home, Helen? We have several routes in operation, but I'm going to see if I can get you back by the quickest way possible. We have to contact London first. Be patient, and don't go wandering around. If the Germans discover this family are hiding you, they'll be shot. I won't do anything to jeopardise their safety. I'm sure you won't. Helen smiled. I had to warn you, though. Get some rest. And you take care, he told her, as she climbed through the small entrance. For the next 2 days he was cooped up in the small room. He was fed at irregular times, and often heard people, sometimes German voices, but he kept very quiet. He was worried about Helen. He had liked her from the moment he'd set eyes on her, and to find her here had really shaken him. This was damn dangerous. When Helen did finally arrive, the relief was immense. Come on, Tim. There's a Lysander due to arrive tonight with another agent. They'll take you back. We must hurry. He was stiff after being confined to that small space, and he was glad to get out and stretch his legs. The field was about a mile away, and they reached it without mishap. Then they settled down in some trees to wait. No one spoke, and Tim could feel the tension radiating through the group. After what seemed like an age, Tim heard the sound of a small plane and watched as the men ran out to put lights to mark the landing spot. He was jumpy, expecting Germans to arrive at any minute. He would rather be up in the air than on the ground like this. At least he had some control up there. Down here, he felt too vulnerable. When the plane landed, one of the men grabbed hold of Tim and rushed him towards the Lysander. He was on the plane before he had a chance to thank his rescuers or say goodbye to Helen. The plane was back in the air in what seemed a matter of seconds. Tim suddenly felt absolutely drained and ran a hand over his eyes. "You all right, chum?" the pilot said, as they climbed and headed for the coast. "Yes, thanks. This is a blasted dangerous game you're all playing." The pilot chuckled. "You can relax now. We'll be landing at Thamesford, Cambridge. Sleep if you want to." Tim closed his eyes. He'd become an expert at snatching sleep whenever he could during the height of the battle. They all had. "We've landed, sir." "What?" Tim sat up quickly. Have I slept all the way? He went out like a light as soon as we were over the channel. A cheer went up from the ground staff when Tim clambered out of the Lysander, and calls of, "Well done, sir, welcome back." He was quite touched by their obvious delight. The squadron leader stepped forward and shook his hand. "You look as if you've had a rough time. I expect the first thing you need's a shower, shave and change of clothes." Tim grimaced, conscious for the first time about his dishevelled state. His uniform was torn and dirty, and he had several days' growth of beard, but that could wait. "I must phone Kenley first, sir. My squadron leader was shot down over the channel, and I need to know if he survived." "Kenley was informed that you might be arriving tonight, and they sent a message for you. Squadron leader Meredith was found and is in Aldershot Military Hospital with relatively minor injuries, and suffering from a prolonged dip in the sea." "Oh, thank God." The relief sweeping over Tim made him sway slightly after days of worrying about his friend. "Come on, let's get you cleaned up and a good meal inside you. Then the MO must check you over. You look exhausted. The debriefing can wait until tomorrow." That was going to be tricky, Tim thought, as they walked towards the building. He had made a promise to Helen that he would never talk about the people who had helped him, and nothing on this earth would make him break that promise. Without them, he would either be a prisoner or dead. An hour later, he was feeling much better, but he was surprised at just how much the last few days had taken out of him. After the relief of hearing that James was all right, everything had seemed to sweep in on him, making him realise fully the danger he'd been in. Thanks to Helen and her friends, though, he had come through and would be able to carry on the fight. "You've come out of this well," the medical officer told him, when the examination was finished. "All you need is rest. You're wound up like a spring. There's a bed in the next room, so get some sleep." "I've got to get back to Kenley." Tim stood up and headed for the door. "Must see if I can borrow transport of some kind." "Oh, no, you don't, young man." The MO stopped him. "You are not going to drive or fly anything tonight. Sleep." "I can't sleep, Doc, and it isn't worth going to bed. It's 3 a.m. Anyway, I slept on the plane." "As soon as it's light, you can return to your base, but I'm not letting you go before then." "All right." Tim gave in and walked into the other room. The next thing he knew, the sun was streaming through the window. Chapter 17. The debriefing had taken a long time, but thankfully they'd accepted that Tim couldn't give the names or places of his rescuers in France, as lives depended upon his silence. After that, he'd spoken to Colonel Askew and Major Chester to ask that James not be told he was back. He wanted to surprise him. He strode into the ward and saw his friend at once. He was sitting in a chair reading a book. When Tim reached him, James saw his feet first, and then his gaze shot straight up to his face. He reached out and prodded him. "I am real," Tim laughed. "Good grief, I thought I was hallucinating. Where the hell did you come from?" "I wouldn't call it hell, but that's a close description." Tim sat on the edge of the bed. "I got back last night and came as soon as they'd let me. I've been worried sick in case they hadn't found you. It took a while. You gave me a fright when I saw you disappearing towards France. I knew you didn't have enough petrol to get back, you blasted fool. I ought to put you on a charge for pulling a stunt like that." "Will it help my case if I told you I thought he was ready to dive on you while you were in the sea, and I dumped him in the water as well?" Tim asked, smiling broadly. James laughed then. "Oh, it's good to see you. Tell me what happened after that." "Well, after shooting him down, I made for the nearest land. I was running dry when I crossed the coast, so before bailing out, I turned the Spitfire towards the sea and jumped. I didn't want the plane to come down on land and alert the Germans that I was there." "Good thinking. What happened then?" "I had a rough landing in some trees, but got away with only bruises. Some locals found me and took me to a safe place. I stayed there until a Lysander arrived and brought me back." "You were lucky." Tim nodded. "So, how long are you going to be in here?" "I've got some leave now." "Another couple of days, they think. I'll be grounded for a while, and so will you. Perhaps we can get together with Grace and Helen again. Grace is stationed here and has been in a couple of times to see me." Why don't you find her and ask if there's any chance of them getting leave together again?" "A good idea. I'll do that." Tim knew that would be impossible, but he had to go along with it. There was no way he would give even a hint of what he knew. He stayed with James until the nursing sister came and threw him out. "I'll see if I can get hold of a car, James. That will make it easier for you to get around." "You've disturbed my patient long enough," the sister said, trying to give Tim a stern look. "Time to leave." "I'm on my way, sister." He strode out, with a smile on his face. Oh, it was good to be home. The door, connecting the offices, was open, and Grace heard someone come in, and the Major General shake hands with him, but she couldn't see who it was. "There's someone to see you, Grace." She looked up, startled to hear him use her Christian name. When she saw the smiling man behind him, she leapt to her feet. "Tim! Oh, it's so good to see you." "Hello, Grace." Tim hugged her in a fierce embrace. "You're even more beautiful than the last time I saw you." She laughed, so relieved to see he was alive. "And you're still the master of flattery. Where have you been? And does James know you're all right?" "I've just seen him. I took an unscheduled trip to France." "How did you get back?" "By Lysander." Major General Hayden was still standing there, watching and listening intently. "Make a pot of tea, Grace. I'm sure Tim would like to stay a while and talk to you." He'd said it again. "If it's all right with you, sir." "Of course." He smiled at Tim. "Good to have one of our precious pilots snatched back from under the noses of the Germans. Well done, young man." "Thank you, sir. It's good to be home." "Enjoy your tea, and don't feel you have to rush away." He turned towards his office, and then stopped, looking back over his shoulder. "If you have a spare moment later, I would enjoy hearing about your experiences in France." Grace knew exactly what he was doing. All the friendliness was because he wanted information, and by the expression on Tim's face, he knew as well. As the door closed, Grace put her fingers to her lips and nodded towards an intercom on her desk. The red light was showing to indicate it was on. Tim nodded and began to talk about the night in London they'd all enjoyed. When a call came through for her boss, Grace connected it and then flicked the switch to turn off the intercom. This was the only time she was allowed to disconnect it. "Now we can't be overheard, Tim. He's an intelligence officer, and you know he will squeeze you for any information he can get." "I realise that, but I've already been through a vigorous debriefing by my own people. I can't talk to anyone else about what happened, and he knows that." "It won't stop him trying, though." Grace's door surged open, and a German pilot walked in, accompanied by 2 guards. "What the—" Tim was immediately on his feet, and stepped towards the German. He had lost too many good friends to feel kindly towards any of them. Grabbing his arm, Grace stopped him. "It's all right, Tim," she laughed. "This is Captain Reed. He likes dressing up as the enemy." Bill grinned and bowed gracefully towards them. The 2 guards were obviously in on the charade, and having difficulty in keeping straight faces. "I've just been arrested. Is his lordship in, Grace?" Still laughing, she checked that he had finished his phone call. "He's free now. You can go in." "Ask the guards to wait outside your door, Grace. They won't take orders from me." "I should think not. You are their prisoner, Captain." He saluted Tim. "Sorry I can't stay and compare notes on tactics with you, sir." "Oh, for heaven's sake." Grace pushed Bill towards the door. There was a look of utter disbelief on Tim's face as he watched Bill disappear into the other office. As soon as the guards had stepped outside, he turned to Grace. "What kind of a madhouse do you work in?" "I really do wonder at times," she admitted. Then she told him about her interview here and had him roaring with laughter. "The captain didn't fool you then?" "Not for long. He's very good, but James taught me to look past the outward appearances for small details. He was a master at reading body language, and there will often be something in gestures that will give you a sign that they're hiding something. The eyes can tell you so much as well. I've heard it said that they are the windows to the soul." She gave a small smile. "That's another one of my mother's sayings. She's full of them. Anyway, I've only ever met one person who could mask his feelings completely when he wanted to, and that was Major Chester." "Really? I'm intrigued. What do you see in me?" "Are you sure you want to know?" He laughed. Come on, Grace. Let me see if you really can do this. All right. I would say that you're guarding something you don't want to talk about, and it's very important to you. And considering what you've just been through, it isn't hard to guess it's something that happened in France. She laughed at his expression. Don't worry, Tim. There isn't anything clever about that. I could say the same thing to hundreds of men who have had traumatic experiences. There is always a reluctance to talk about it. Don't believe her when she dismisses that ability so easily, said a quiet voice from the doorway. She's very perceptive. I'm sure you're right, Captain, Tim said. It also makes me see why James was such a successful lawyer. The ability to sum people up accurately also makes him an excellent squadron leader. Call the guards back, Grace, her boss ordered. Then you can both help us. Once everyone was there, he said, Tim, your experiences will make your advice invaluable. I want both of you to take a good look at the German pilot. He's been shot down over London and bailed out, landing in a garden. What's wrong with him? He's too clean, Tim said immediately. Jumping from a stricken plane wouldn't be easy, and after landing in a garden he would be a mess. His uniform would probably be torn. Mine was, and I was filthy by the time I extracted myself from the parachute. Good. Grace? She studied him intently for a few moments. Shoes. I left my flying boots behind when I jumped. These were given to me. You might get away with that, Captain, and for goodness sake, take that wristwatch off. It's far too expensive for you to have been given that. How do you know I'm wearing it? By the amused look in your eyes? You are testing me, Captain. If you really were a downed German pilot who had been captured, you would be afraid, not knowing what was going to happen to you, even angry. What happened to the rest of your crew? They didn't survive. Then you would be sad and very angry. And another small thing, Tim said, smiling wryly. I ended up with quite a few bruises as well. Grace had an uncomfortable feeling that this wasn't a joke. Her boss was definitely on edge. I don't know what you're wearing underneath, Captain, but for the deception to be complete, it mustn't be English underwear. All German, except for the shoes and watch. Tim reached into his pocket and held out a watch. You'd better take this, Captain. It's a genuine German pilot's watch. My word, that's good of you. Bill removed his own watch and handed it to Tim. We'll swap, and I promise to return this to you. They shook hands, and Grace could see respect in their eyes for each other, and perhaps the beginning of a friendship. Anything else? Stan demanded, when Grace and Tim shook their heads. He turned to the guards. You know what to do. You've heard what has been said, so mess him up a bit. Bill grimaced. Thank you for your good advice, Grace and Tim, I think. Then he saluted and turned towards the door. Be careful, Bill, Stan said quietly. We won't be far away. He nodded, spun round and said to the guards, Right, men, let's get this show on the road. Stan stared at the door for a few moments and then looked at Tim. I could do with a strong drink. Will you join me, young man? My pleasure, sir. Tim hugged Grace. James and I will be grounded for a while, so let us know if you have any time off. I will. I had a letter from Helen, and she said she's hoping to have leave at Christmas. Oh, that would be marvellous, if we could all meet up again. He kissed her cheek and left with the officer. Grace found it hard to settle down to work. Her mind was focused on what had just happened. The wonderful part was that Tim was alive and well, and that was a huge relief, and must be especially so to James. He had been distressed about his missing friend. The thing playing on her mind, though, was what Bill was playing at. At first, she had assumed it was one of his games with new recruits, but it had soon become clear that this was not a game. She fervently wished they would take her into their confidence. It was worrying, not knowing what was going on. It was over an hour later when her boss returned, and instead of going straight to his office, as he usually did, he sat by her desk. Tim's a fine young man. Yes, sir, he is. Is he your boyfriend? No, sir. He's interested in my friend Helen. Where was this leading? Why was he suddenly so friendly? Ah, and is your friend in the forces? The Fanny, sir. She's an interpreter for the Free French. Speaks the language well, does she? Her grandmother's French, and I learnt the language from them. They live next door to us." "That was useful." He smiled and nodded. "Why don't you pop along and see James? I understand he could be discharged in a day or two." For a moment she was lost for words. He was acting quite out of character. I can go this evening, sir." "You won't be able to. We're leaving at 6 o'clock. We might be away for a while." "Where are we going, sir?" "Somerset." He stood up and smiled again. "Off you go then, Grace. Be back before 6 with your bag." "Yes, sir." The day was full of surprises, Grace thought, as they sped along in a comfortable car with a driver and a lieutenant in the front. The car had a privacy screen raised, so anyone in the front couldn't hear what was being said in the back. Grace had expected to go by train again, but it looked as if it was going to be luxury all the way. "I expect you're wondering what this is all about," Major General Hayden said. "Yes, sir. Where is the captain?" "He's already there. Bill is posing as a German pilot and has been taken to a prisoner of war camp. He's there on an intelligence mission. That was why we were so intent on making him look genuine. We won't see him for a couple of days, but I want to be close at hand. I didn't like this idea, but it came from high up, and orders are orders. I don't believe that these men will talk, and the risk of putting someone in there with them is too great. I have brought you along in case we need your skill with German, though I hope that won't be necessary." Grace caught her breath. "That's dangerous, sir." "I know. In your opinion, is he good enough?" She'd never seen her boss worried, but he was now. "His German is excellent, and he has enough acting flair to pull it off. Actually living among them, though, means he mustn't let his guard drop for a moment." Stan nodded. "I might have to ask you to step in as interpreter if things go wrong. My German isn't good enough. Do you think you could do that?" "Yes, sir," she told him confidently. "I won't let you down if I'm needed." "Thank you, Grace." Chapter 18. It had been past midnight when they had arrived at their destination, and Grace hadn't taken much notice of her surroundings. The sound of birds singing woke her, and the early morning sun was streaming into the room. She jumped out of bed and ran to the window, and the sight that met her eyes brought a smile of pleasure to her face. They were on a farm. There was a knock on the door, and a middle-aged woman looked in. "Oh, you're awake. I thought you might like a cup of tea." "I would love one, thank you. We didn't have much time to get acquainted last night. My name is Grace." "I'm Enid. I hope you slept well." "I did. The bed was so comfortable, and it was quiet after London. Is this your farm?" "It's been in my husband's family for 3 generations. Drink your tea before it gets cold. Your officer's already up and about." "Is he?" Grace quickly drank the tea. "Then I must hurry." "No need to rush. He's gone riding with our son, and they won't be back for a while. Come down when you're ready and I'll cook you a nice breakfast." There was such a tempting smell coming from the kitchen, and it only took Grace 30 minutes to find out what was for breakfast. She couldn't believe the amount of food put in front of her: 2 eggs, bacon, sausage and mushrooms. "You can't give me all this," she gasped. "It's taking all your rations." Enid laughed. "It's all from the farm, dear. And with an important officer staying with us, we're expected to feed you well. You eat up and enjoy it." End of CD 5. CD 6. "Do you take in guests regularly?" Grace asked, already tackling the sumptuous breakfast. "We are quite remote, and it's often convenient for military officers to stay here. The prisoner of war camp is only a few miles away, and my husband Dave was told you needed to be near. We're happy to help in any way we can." "That is kind of you," Grace said, clearing her plate. "Do you mind if I have a wander round until my officer returns?" "Not at all, dear. You go where you like." It was a lovely morning, and Grace stopped by a field of golden corn, almost ready for harvest. It was such a beautiful and tranquil sight after the noise and destruction of London. She sighed. Brian would have loved this. It had always been his dream to live in the country. She continued walking, deep in thought, and then she heard her name being called. Lieutenant Grover was striding towards her, and she saluted when he reached her. "Do you know where Major General Hayden is?" "He's gone riding, sir." "We'll have to find him. We're needed at the camp." On hearing that, Grace's tranquil mood evaporated and was replaced with worry. "I'll see if anyone knows where he might be." She was just about to return to the house when horses appeared from behind a barn. The lieutenant made his way over to them, and after a short discussion, Stan Hayden came to Grace and told her to come with them. Nothing was said when they got into the waiting car and drove to the camp, where the commander was waiting for them. "What's the problem?" Stan looked worried. "Not sure how serious it is, but you might need to get your man out of there. I can't pull him out because it'll look suspicious. The best way would be to interview several of the prisoners, including the captain. That way he can let us know if his identity has been discovered without anyone else knowing. I'll choose them." "Right. Go ahead." Stan turned to Grace. "Come with us." The commander looked at Grace and shook his head. "You can't bring a woman in here. It'll be too unsettling for men locked up without female company." "They won't be interested in me, sir," she pointed out, disappointed that she was going to be sidelined again. "I'm English." The camp commander grinned. "Where did you find her, Stan?" "She was recommended by several people, so I sent for her thinking she could easily be dismissed." He laughed softly. "I was wrong. You're right, though. Stay in the car, Grace, and I'll send for you if I need you. I'm not sure my German will be up to this." "They all speak passable English, Stan." "Ah, that's all right then." Grace watched them walk away and disappear into the camp. Just when she thought they might give her something important to do, she had been told to wait. Again. She'd never been overly ambitious, always content to be a good secretary. But after her lovely husband had been taken from her so cruelly, she burnt to be useful. She wouldn't call it revenge, not the same emotion that Dan struggled with, but it was close. The way things were going, she was going to have to rethink her contribution to this war, and settle for what she had been trained for. If she could make an officer's life easier by taking care of all the details in his day, then that would be of help, surely. The driver put his head in the car. "This might take some time. Would you like me to see if I can get you a cup of tea?" "That would be lovely, thank you. White, no sugar, please." "I'll see what I can do." The tea was welcome, and Grace spent the time talking to John, the driver. It was 2 hours before Stan and the lieutenant appeared. "Is everything all right, sir?" Grace asked as they drove back to the farm. "For the moment. There was a fight last night and Bill stepped in to stop it, earning himself a cut lip for his trouble. I wanted to take him out, but he insists on staying. I've told him to keep out of trouble." Stan sighed wearily. "Not much hope of that, the daft sod." "I'm sure he's well aware of the danger, sir, and will be careful." He didn't sound as if he quite believed that as he handed her a small exercise book. "Can you read that?" The pages were filled with shorthand, and after a quick glance she nodded. "He obviously wrote this in a hurry, but I should be able to make sense of it." "Bill said you would. I want you to decipher that and make me a copy when we get back to the farm. We've got a typewriter in the boot of the car." "Yes, sir." Grace had continued reading and gave a quiet laugh at one of Bill's descriptions. Stan sighed noisily. "You can leave out the swear words and any irrelevant remarks. I only want the facts, Grace." "His language is quite moderate, sir, but he does have an amusing way of describing things." "Don't I know it? If he wasn't so darned clever, I wouldn't put up with him." "No, sir." Grace looked at the man beside her, and they both laughed. "He's also very charismatic, and I even liked him when for a brief period I thought he was a German pilot." "That's the effect he has on all women. He reminds me of Dan Chester. They're both too clever for their own good, don't you think?" "Both are intelligent, I agree. I wouldn't say they're similar in character." "I suppose you're right, but they are both damn difficult men to handle." Grace nodded, and they smiled knowingly at each other. This was the most relaxed they'd ever been with each other, and it was a good feeling. She worked all afternoon on the captain's notes. Some of it had clearly been rushed and was difficult to decipher, but this didn't worry her. She was enjoying the challenge, something that had been lacking in this job so far, and as the notes took shape she could see there was important information there. Bill was obviously good at his job, and she was sure that Major General Hayden would be pleased. They had been given a room downstairs to use as an office, and as soon as the notes were typed she took them down there. "Good, you've finished." Stan held out his hand for the document. "What have we got, Grace?" "I think you'll find some of it useful, sir." She handed over the papers and went to leave, but he told her to stay. She waited while he read, frowning the way he always did when concentrating. "We'll have to get some of this checked out, but, if true, Bill will have gleaned some information. I'm not sure if it's important enough to put his life at risk in this way, though," he remarked, looking up. "I'll give him 2 more days in there and then I'm getting him out." "Is there anything else I can do for you, sir?" "No, that's all for today. You've done a good job on this. We will just be playing a waiting game for the next day or so." He smiled. "Why don't you take this opportunity to learn to ride?" "A horse?" she asked, horrified. He laughed at her expression. "You'll love it. Meet us by the stables at 7 in the morning." "Is that an order, sir?" "If that is what it takes to get you on a horse, then it is. I don't believe you're afraid of horses or anything after the tales I've heard about you and Dan." "Yes, well—" Her mouth twitched in amusement at the memories. "So you might as well add horse riding to your skills." "Yes, sir." As she left the room, she could hear him laughing. She was beginning to like this job, at last. Horses were not for her. Grace vowed as she slid out of the saddle, relieved to feel solid ground under her feet. That had been the most uncomfortable 2 hours she'd ever spent. "There, that wasn't so bad, was it?" Stan said, as he dismounted. Grace glared at him. "I would rather tackle an army assault course than get on another horse." "You did well, considering it was your first time." He grinned. "What could be more enjoyable than an early morning ride in beautiful countryside?" "Would you like a list, sir?" "You're not a country girl, are you?" He laughed. "Come on, let's get breakfast. I'm starving." Fortunately, she didn't have to repeat the morning ride again. The next day she was kept busy until the evening when Bill arrived at the farm still wearing his German uniform. "What are you doing here?" Stan exclaimed, the moment he walked in the door. "We had arranged to collect you in the morning." "I escaped." Bill winked at Grace. "Oh, be serious, damn you. What happened?" "I'd done as much as I could there without arousing too much suspicion, so I decided to come and visit you. Nice place. Is there any food?" Stan gazed up at the ceiling in exasperation. "Don't tell me you broke through the fence." "I walked out, but I did bring 2 guards with me for appearance's sake. I told the men they were taking me to another camp." "What about that food?" "Oh, Grace, for heaven's sake, arrange that for him. We won't get any sense out of him until he's had something to eat." "What would you like, Captain?" "Anything, Grace. I missed dinner." There was plenty of a delicious mutton stew left from dinner, and they watched as Bill devoured 2 helpings, and then sit back with a sigh of satisfaction. "Didn't they feed you in the camp?" Grace asked. He nodded. "It wasn't as special as that, though. You can't beat fresh farm food. I hope we're staying here for a couple of days, Stan." "We will be leaving first thing in the morning, but I'll let you have breakfast first. If you've quite finished eating, I want your report." "Tonight?" Stan nodded. "Bring your notebook, Grace." Grace followed the officers and took her seat, ready to record what was said at the meeting. She'd assumed they would want to talk in private, but she was being included again. There was now hope that she was trusted at last. The debriefing went on for 2 hours, and Grace had pages and pages of notes. "Would you like this typed up tonight, sir?" "Good Lord, no. It's midnight. Leave that until we get back to Aldershot." They had only been away for a few days, but there was a pile of correspondence waiting for them. Grace began to sort through it, putting the urgent ones out for immediate attention and the 2 personal letters to one side for later. There was an enormous amount of work to get through before thinking of anything else. It wasn't until lunchtime the next day that she had time to read her letters. The first one was from James, saying they would be in London on Saturday and could she meet them at the Savoy. The thought of an evening out with James and Tim made her smile in anticipation. The smile quickly faded as she read the second letter. It was from Helen's parents, asking her if she knew where their daughter was. They hadn't heard from her for a couple of weeks, and that was unusual, so they'd taken a trip to the New Forest where they thought she was stationed, but she wasn't there. No one would give them any information, and they were worried. Grace immediately wrote to them, explaining that secrecy was necessary, and because Helen's work as an interpreter was probably sensitive, it wasn't surprising they weren't given any information about her. She could have been sent anywhere in the country, and finding time to write wasn't always easy. Grace sealed the letter, hoping it would help to put their minds at rest. It had planted a seed of doubt in her mind, though. Their letters to each other had been irregular with lengthy gaps in between, but Grace understood the situation they were both in, and it hadn't worried her. "Ah, Grace, you're here." Bill came in and sat down. "I want to give Tim back his watch. How do I get in touch with him? Is he still at Kenley?" "As a matter of fact, I'm meeting him and James in London on Saturday evening." "Marvellous. Would you mind if I came along? I'd like to see him again." "I'm sure you'd be very welcome. They'll be there around 6 o'clock. "Terrific. I'll commandeer a car." He stood up, smiling broadly, and then bent to kiss her cheek. "Thanks, Grace." "Keep your hands off my staff," said a sharp voice from the doorway. "Try your amorous advances on women of your own rank." Bill grinned boyishly, not at all put out by the reprimand. "I was just thanking Grace. We're going to meet James and Tim on Saturday. Want to come?" Stan laughed softly. "You're lucky. I've got another appointment, or else I might have accepted." Grace watched the two men. They always spoke to each other like this, but the respect they held for each other was evident. Laughing, Bill kissed her cheek again and marched out of the office. Stan was shaking his head. "Don't get attached to that man, Grace. He will end up in serious trouble before this war's over. Like Dan Chester, he's a risk-taker." "I don't intend to become fond of anyone, sir. I don't want to suffer the pain of loss again." "Of course not. Sensible girl." It was lovely to see James and Tim again. They were both fully recovered from their crashes and back to flying again, which was the only thing they wanted to do. Grace introduced Bill to them, and they were soon all laughing at Tim's account of seeing a German pilot in Grace's office. "I've gate-crashed your evening to return your watch, Tim." "Oh, thanks. We can swap back." He removed Bill's watch from his wrist. "I've been wearing it all the time to keep it safe." Bill gave the young pilot an incredulous look. "You take to the air every day being shot at, and you think that was keeping it safe?" Both pilots grinned, and James said, "He's safer in the air than driving a car. Did it help with your masquerade?" "Perfect. You'll join us for the rest of the evening, Bill," Tim suggested. "I'd like that." They found a comfortable corner to sit and talk, enjoying a quiet, relaxing evening together. It amused Grace to see the looks being cast her way, and could almost hear their thoughts. What was a girl of low rank doing with 3 officers? "It's a shame Helen isn't home as well," James remarked. At the mention of her friend, the worry came back, and Grace wished she knew what Helen was doing. She seemed to have disappeared. That wasn't unusual in this war, of course, when secrecy was so tight and you often didn't know where your friends and relatives were. "I'm hoping she'll be able to come home for Christmas. It's ages since I've seen her." "When you write next time, tell her we're expecting her." "I will, James." Grace smiled at Tim. "It would be fun to go dancing again, wouldn't it?" "It certainly would." The tone of his voice made her study him intently. Tim had answered as if he doubted that would happen. Bill and James were talking together, so Grace leant forward and spoke quietly. "What's the matter, Tim?" "What makes you ask that?" "Just a feeling. And it has something to do with Helen. Don't you want to see her again? If that's so, please say and we won't come out with you again." "I would love to see her again. And I really hope she does make it home soon." There it was again. His demeanour had changed at the mention of Helen. He had become guarded. "What aren't you telling me, Tim?" "I don't know what you mean." He sat back, smiling. "Working with those intelligence boys is making you suspicious. I haven't seen Helen since we went dancing." That sounded like a lie, but why would he deny it? If they'd been in contact with each other, there was no need to hide the fact, surely. She shook her head. Perhaps he was right, and she was concerned about nothing. "Sorry, Tim, but I had a letter from her parents and they're worried. They don't know where she is." "I'm afraid that's happening all the time. I have an older brother in the Navy and we haven't a clue where he is. It's just the way things are, Grace." "You're right, and that's just what I told them." Grace relaxed. "That letter must have spooked me." "That's what it is." He stood up. "Another drink, everyone?" Chapter 19. "I might have known I'd find you in the middle of a field in the freezing cold." George stamped his feet and blew on his hands. Dan spun round and saluted smartly for appearance's sake, pleased to see his uncle again. "What brings you out here, George?" "I've been trying to get hold of you for days." He cast an expert eye over the scene. "Are they battle-ready, Dan?" "That's a question none of us can answer until we're faced with it. The majority of them were raw recruits after Dunkirk, but I believe they'll do well when the time comes." "You're working them hard, so I would say you're expecting to be shipped out soon." "You would probably know before me." "You'll be here for Christmas, and a while after that. I can't tell you what's being planned." "Of course not." "Can we go somewhere warmer to talk?" "You're spending too much time in that cosy War Office. It's making you soft, George." "I'll only be there for a few more months, and then I'm returning to active duty, at last. Every experienced officer is going to be needed in the field." "I agree. Let me transfer command and we can return to the camp." George watched his nephew with a touch of pride. He was a damn fine soldier, and he prayed he would survive this conflict. "In just 1 week, this war has taken a completely different course," George said as they drove back. "The Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor on the 7th of December. Then we declared war on Japan, and the United States and Germany declared war on each other. What a week! And totally unexpected." Dan stopped by the officers' quarters. "Let's get something to eat." "Can you stay for a while?" "Until tomorrow." "Good. That will give us the evening to talk." They walked towards the building, and George looked pointedly at Dan. "Putting that all aside for the moment, we've still got to do something about Rommel in North Africa." "Warmer there?" "In more ways than one." Dan glanced at his uncle, and they nodded to each other, understanding the hint. They were surprised to see Stan and another officer waiting inside. "Ah, Dan. I was hoping we'd see you." "If you've come with the same request, the answer's still no." "Oh, I've given up hope on that." Stan held out his hand. "Good to see you again, George." Bill noted the way they greeted each other. They were all officers of different ranks, but obviously knew each other well enough to dispense with formalities when no one else was around. "We were just going to get some lunch. Would you like to join us?" Dan suggested. "Thank you. May I introduce Captain William Reed? Bill wanted to meet you, Dan, and I think you'll find you have a lot in common. Like you, he spent some years in Germany." During the meal, they were soon comparing notes, interested in each other's experiences. "How is Grace working out, Stan?" George asked. "Quite well," was the casual reply. Bill stopped in mid-sentence and snorted in disgust. "He still won't admit he's met his match. They've had a tussle of wills ever since Grace came to us. Stan wanted a man, but none of those sent to us were suitable, so he had to take Grace. He's done everything he could to make her put in for a transfer, but she wouldn't give in." A deep rumble of laughter came from Stan. "She's stubborn, I'll give you that, and speaks her mind if pushed too hard. She's also efficient. I've never denied that, Bill, but what I was looking for was someone to partner with you. I can't send a woman into a dangerous situation." "That's just what is happening with a certain organisation now." "We know what you're referring to, Bill. We both have the highest security clearance from working at the War Office," George told him. Stan nodded and looked round to make sure they were not being overheard. Even in a place like this, they couldn't be too careful. I know the SOE have been recruiting women, and I also know that if given the chance, they would take Grace as well. The fact remains that I couldn't put a woman with you, Bill. You love women far too much, and if faced with a difficult decision, you would put a woman first, and that just wouldn't work. I couldn't trust you to get the job done, regardless of the dangers. See what I have to put up with, Dan? Bill shook his head in exasperation. Not only is he underestimating me, but he's also doing the same with Grace. Stan, you didn't see what she did to me in that interview. She wiped the floor with me. I'd say she's more than capable enough of looking after herself. That's what I mean. My concern is for you, not Grace. Bill rested his head in his hands, muttering, I give up. A slow smile spread across Stan's face. She also told me exactly what she thought of our methods. I could have had her up on a charge of insubordination, and she's come close to it a few times since then. That's my girl, George declared. My godson, James, trained her well, so you watch your steps, Stan. There are several of us with a keen interest in her welfare. I've met James, Bill told George. He's a fine man and interesting to talk to. While we were having a drink, I heard Grace talking to Tim, and she's concerned about her friend. Evidently she's part French, and they seem to have lost track of her. I reckon there's a good chance she's been recruited to the Special Operations Executive, but I didn't say anything, of course. Dan was sitting back, listening, but saying nothing. That's more than likely, Stan agreed. I still wouldn't put a woman with you, Bill. I've always wanted you and Dan to work together. Stan? All right, Dan. He held up his hands in surrender. I won't pursue the subject any longer. Bloody shame, though. What do you think about America coming into the war? George asked, changing the subject. It's what Churchill has wanted, but that was a terrible way for it to happen. When I heard the news, I couldn't believe Japan would launch an attack like that. Then Hitler declared war on America. It was incredible and stupid. Hitler's already in trouble with the Russian winter, and those two countries could live to regret their decisions. Dan nodded. You're right. Hitler's making too many mistakes. Instead of invading immediately after Dunkirk when we were vulnerable, he's given us time to recover. We are once again strong, and there won't be another Dunkirk. This war has taken a surprising turn, and Dan is right, George agreed. Hitler did his best to destroy our air force and bomb us into submission, but that hasn't worked. Our day will come, and we're not alone this time. Bill grinned. Boatloads of American troops will be arriving here next year. 1942 should be interesting. I've got a whole 2 weeks. Grace hugged her parents. That's wonderful, her mother exclaimed. You and Helen will be able to relax and enjoy yourselves. You both look as if you need a rest. She's home. She arrived early this morning. Ted took the heavy kit bag from his daughter and hoisted it onto his shoulder. I'll take this upstairs for you. What have you got in it, for heaven's sake? Grace laughed. Presents and some tins of food. I'll have a cup of tea, Mum, and then I'll go and see Helen. She sent a message to say she'll see you this evening. She's evidently been travelling a lot and needs to catch up on some sleep. Sounds as if she's been busy, and that's probably why we haven't heard from her very much lately. I expect so. Anyway, there's another message for you. James called last week and asked if you would be home. When I told him you would be, he said they would call round on New Year's Eve, in the hope you'd be free to spend the evening with him and Tim. That would be lovely, but would you mind me not spending the time with you and Dad? Not at all. Ted came into the kitchen. You girls go off and enjoy yourselves. Thanks. Do you know how long Helen's got? 3 weeks. What? Are you sure, Mum? When Jean nodded, Grace said, Lucky devil. I wonder how she wangled that. Well, she hasn't had any leave for a long time, so I expect they've given her extra this time. Grace shrugged and sat down. Perhaps they did things differently in the Fanny. After taking a sip of tea, she sighed with pleasure. There's nothing like your tea, Mum. You should taste some of the stuff we get. It's an insult to call it tea. The rest of the day was spent on catching up with all the local news, and in a quiet moment Grace wandered into the front room. This was a very austere time, with everything in short supply, but her parents had made the room look festive. The paper chains were handmade, and they'd managed to get some holly and a small tree from somewhere. Grace sat down and closed her eyes. It was at times like this the loss of Brian was the hardest. Coming home always made the memories come flooding back. Damn the war, she thought angrily. And the man who had started it. Are you asleep, Grace? Her eyes opened and she leapt to her feet. Helen! Oh, it's so good to see you. Where have you been? Her friend grinned. Mind your own business. What have you been up to? Mind your own business. The friends laughed and hugged each other. That's got the questions out of the way. Is that right? You've got 3 weeks? That's right. How much have you managed to get? 2 weeks. And we've got a date with James and Tim for New Year's Eve. Lovely. It'll be good to see them again. Instead of a sports car, James and Tim arrived in a smart officer's car. The girls watched it stop outside and grinned at each other. I wonder how they got hold of that. Helen laughed. Goodness knows. Grace shook her head. I suspect they're used to going after what they want in the air and on the ground. I don't doubt that, Helen agreed, putting her hand out to stop her friend from moving. Your mother's beaten you to the door. The moment the two men walked in, they stopped with wide smiles on their faces when they saw Helen was there as well. This is marvellous. We were hoping you would both be able to get home for the holidays. Good job we managed to get 2, Tim. Grace was intrigued. It was hard to take in the fact that this was the same man she'd worked for at the law firm. They each had one hand behind their backs and devilish grins on their faces. What had they been up to now? Ready? James asked, and when Tim nodded, they held out their gifts. Orchids, Grace gasped. Where did you get those from? No, forget I asked that. We really don't want to know. They're beautiful. Glad you like them. Tim stepped towards Helen. We've even brought pins with us. The girls stood patiently while the exotic blooms were pinned to their uniforms. Then the 2 pilots stepped back and saluted smartly. Here's to 1942. Grace and Helen joined in by returning the salutes, and then it was hugs all round, with the 2 sets of parents joining in. Off you go and enjoy yourselves, Helen's father said. You take good care of our girls, though. We will, sir. Tim had his arm resting across Helen's shoulder. No harm will come to them while they're with us. Where are we going? Grace asked James as they made their way to the car. Somewhere big and noisy, was all he said. James hadn't been joking. The Hammersmith dance hall was packed with people intent on forgetting the war for a few hours and having a good time. The men led them straight to the dance floor, and when James began to spin Grace around, she asked, What dance is this? It's what the Americans call a jitterbug or jive. Come on, I'll show you how to do it. At the end of the dance, she was laughing with pleasure. Where did you learn that? From a couple of American pilots. But they aren't here yet. I thought the first troops would be arriving in January. A few qualified pilots came over early and joined the RAF. Really? I didn't know that. There are quite a few different nationalities with us now, James grinned. Tim is learning French from a French Canadian. I think he wants to be able to speak the language in case he ever finds himself in France again. That would be useful. Grace looked across the room, where Tim and Helen were talking to another man in RAF uniform. You've both recovered well from your crashes. Has Tim told you exactly what happened to him? James shook his head. All he will say is that he gave his word to protect the people who helped him. I can understand that. Whoever it was, though, must have been in touch with London because they sent in a Lysander. There are British agents with the underground, Grace. He must have been lucky enough to contact such a group, and I expect that's why he won't say a word. Anyway, enough of this serious talk. You need more lessons in the jive. Chapter 20. Closing the office door firmly behind him, Stan watched Bill sit down before walking over to his desk. London's crowded these days. Bill laughed. I don't suppose many of those American boys have ever been outside their own country before. You can't blame them for wanting to see London in the spring. Stan studied the man in front of him for a moment, and then said, Do you think this risky operation will work? Not sure, but we won't know unless we try. You'll need someone with you, preferably a girl who can speak French like a native. We can contact the SOE. They will have someone who could do that. I've already got someone in mind. Oh? Stan frowned. Who's that? Grace. No. She's perfect for this mission, and her French is excellent. No. Stop saying no. Bill raised his voice in an unusual show of anger. You can't take Grace. Find someone else. At least give her the chance to refuse. If you don't ask her, then I will. I'm the one going on this mission, and I want someone with me I can trust. We've got 2 months to train her. And stop shouting! Stan sat back and took a deep breath. Just because we are long-time family friends doesn't mean you can be insubordinate. So watch your tone. I don't know why I'm getting so angry anyway. She'll never agree to it. She'll jump at the chance. Bet you a £5. £5? You're sure of yourself? I met Dan at the War Office yesterday. He was visiting his uncle. We had lunch together, and I managed to get him to talk about Grace. His opinion was that she would handle any challenge she was faced with and still keep her composure. You're stifling her, Stan, and it is an indication of her self-control that she hasn't shown her frustration. After talking to Dan, I was certain she'd be right for this mission. The corners of Bill's mouth turned up in amusement as he sensed victory. So, are you going to risk a £5? It will give me great pleasure to take your money. Ask Grace to come in here. Bill jumped to his feet and opened the door. Grace, we need you. She came in and sat down, notepad at the ready. Don't record this. We would like you to settle an argument. Stan told her. Bill will tell you all about it. There is a chateau in the south of France with extensive grounds. The Germans have sealed it off completely, and it is heavily guarded. We need to know what they're doing there. The resistance have been unable to get anywhere near it, so I have agreed to see what I can do. I shall be posing as a German army officer with a French girlfriend who is showing me around her country. Bill paused, watching Grace carefully, but her expression gave no indication of her reaction to this news. That was just what he needed to see. We have been arguing, as I expect you heard, about my choice of companion for this mission. Stan has bet £5 that you will refuse. That bombshell did produce a reaction. Grace sat up straight, her gaze fixed on Bill, searching for any hint that this was a joke. This is a serious request, Grace, Bill said quietly. Before you answer, this will be very dangerous. We could be captured or killed, and you will have to jump out of a plane. Take your time, Grace, Stan told her. No one will think any the worse of you if you refuse. When do you go? She asked Bill. Sometime in June. That will give you 2 months to prepare. You will have to go through an intensive training program. Bill sat back and waited. He was well aware how dangerous this was going to be, but he was so sure she was right for this job. Grace remained silent while she looked out of the window. When she turned back to Stan, there was a slight smile on her face. You have lost your bet, sir. He handed over the £5 note to Bill, his expression serious. You will still be able to change your mind over the next couple of weeks. After that, there will be no backing out, Grace. Bill must be given time to replace you. I won't back out, sir. I want to do this. Stan nodded. Bill is no stranger to risky missions, and I trust his judgment that you are the right person for this. I do have one concern, though, and that is your motive for accepting. Grace frowned. My motive? Yes. It has crossed my mind that you might be taking this on to avenge your husband's death. That is something I personally cannot do, sir. The only comfort for me and thousands of others mourning the loss of loved ones will be the defeat of Hitler and his regime. That will only come about by each one of us working together. My only motive is to play my part by using whatever talents I have. You need have no concerns that I will be a liability to the captain, sir. Stan nodded slowly. I believe Bill has chosen well. I will expect to see you both back here by the end of June. Godspeed to both of you. Thank you, sir. Grace stood up when Bill did, and they both saluted. Once in the outer office, Bill told her that they would be leaving at once. There's no time to waste, Grace. Pack your bag, and I'll be waiting outside your billet in a car. Bill had only given her half an hour, and Grace rushed around the room, grabbing items and packing them in her kit bag, and she was glad he wasn't giving her much time to think about her decision. Well, she wasn't going to have second thoughts. After Brian had been killed, she'd wanted to try and find something useful to do, something that would make a difference. At last, the opportunity had come. After a final glance round the room to check she hadn't forgotten anything, she grabbed her bag and ran down the stairs. The car was already there, with Bill propped up against it, smoking a cigarette. No one would guess from his relaxed, casual attitude that they were planning to embark on a dangerous mission. There was a slightly different air about him, though, making her realise there was much more to this man than she'd originally thought. That man, always joking and full of tricks, was just a mask. It was going to be interesting working with him. He stubbed out his cigarette and held the door open for her, while the driver put her kit bag on the boot of the car. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly, once they were on their way. He nodded. "We're going to a manor near Guildford to start your training. Time is short, so we will only be there for a week before moving on to the next place. You're going to have to learn quickly, Grace, because you've got to be able to take care of yourself if anything happens to me. You're going to be pushed to your limits. There will be times when you're exhausted and wish you had never agreed to this. I will be with you all the time because I must be sure you won't panic whatever the situation you're faced with. If you do, then both of our lives will be at risk. If there is the slightest hint that you might not be able to deal with this, you will be straight back in the office. Is that clear?" "Perfectly. I won't let you down." "I'm confident you won't, or I would never have chosen you." He gave a wry smile. "I will also be reading your letters to make sure you don't give anything away." "I'll have to be careful what I say then," she told him. "Very careful, Grace." He turned to face her. "No one must know what we're doing at these training camps. If you do happen to see anyone you know and they ask what you're doing there, you're not to say a word." "I know how important that is, Captain." "Call me Bill at all times from now on, even if top brass are around. We've got to be relaxed and easy in each other's company. Forget my rank. I don't want you snapping to attention and saluting me. That could be awkward in 2 months' time. That's all you need to know at the moment, so relax and enjoy the journey." They arrived, just in time for lunch, and were shown straight to the dining room. Several men nodded to Bill when they walked in, and Grace guessed this wasn't the first time Bill had been here. During the meal, she hardly noticed what she was eating, far too interested in her surroundings, and she was surprised to see an empty plate in front of her. She would not consider herself to be the nervous type, but did admit to feeling apprehensive, not knowing what the following weeks were going to be like. There was only one way to deal with this, and that was to remember one of her mother's favourite sayings and take each day as it came. An officer was striding towards them, and she made a quick assessment of him. He was not a young man, but he moved with all the ease of being very fit. Not sure how she should act in this unusual place, she remained seated and only stood up when Bill rose to his feet. "Good to see you again, Bill." He shook hands with Bill and then turned his full attention on to Grace, his pale grey eyes fixed firmly on her face. "And you've brought Grace with you. Come and see me when you've finished your meal, Bill, and bring Grace with you." "We'll be there very soon, Henry," Bill grinned. "Just in time for coffee." "Of course." The officer laughed. "Henry makes the best coffee I've ever tasted," Bill told her, as the officer walked away, and they sat down again. Over the next week, Grace didn't have a moment to herself. They were cramming 3 weeks' training into one, and at night she gratefully climbed into bed. Her mind was buzzing with all the things she was being taught, but she was still able to sleep, much to her relief. Bill had handed her over to the various instructors, taking no part in the training, but he was always there, watching and assessing her progress. She was very aware that if he saw the slightest hint she wasn't able to cope, he would call a halt. There were obviously women around who were fully trained, and he wouldn't have any trouble replacing her. That wasn't going to happen, she decided, determination surging through her. There were still several weeks to go, but as each day passed, her desire to go on this mission increased. But she would have to prove she was good enough, and that wasn't going to be easy. At the end of the week, she had to face the instructors for a verdict. This was the most nerve-wracking part of the week. So much depended on their assessment of her abilities. "It's been a tough week for you, trying to absorb everything in such a short time," Henry said. "When I received these orders, I declared that it couldn't be done. Do you think you have proved me wrong?" Grace was aware that Bill was standing behind her by the door, and he wasn't going to hear doubt from her. She looked at each instructor and then back to Henry. She smiled and nodded. "I have proved you wrong." "You have a quick mind and a determined nature, and yes, in your case, I was wrong. This has been the easy part, though. It's going to get tougher. But as far as we're concerned, you have done quite well. We shall watch the rest of your training with interest." Grace breathed a silent sigh of relief. Their verdict was not as good as she had hoped, but at least it seemed as if she'd done well enough to go on to the next stage. She was obviously going to have to do better, or Bill would take her off this mission. As she left the room, she glanced at him, but there was nothing to show how he felt about her progress in his expression. Bill had stayed to have a word with the instructors, and she waited patiently outside for him. 20 minutes later he came out. "Time to move on, Grace. Meet me outside as soon as you can." "I'm already packed. I'll be with you in 10 minutes. She hurried to collect her bag, wondering what had been said in that room after she left. She would love to know, but knew better than to ask. Bill obviously wasn't going to say anything until he was sure she was going to make it through the training. They were soon on their way in the car, with the same driver, so she knew it was all right to talk. "Where are we going?" "There's a plane waiting for us at Northolt Airfield to take us up to the Highlands of Scotland, where you'll receive commando training. You will only have 3 weeks, so it's going to be rough." He turned slightly to face her. "I'm relying on you to be honest and tell me the moment you decide not to go on. I will also pull you out if it is apparent we're asking too much of you. If we had more time, I have no doubt you would pass the training schedule, but we don't have that luxury. I fully understand that you have to be able to rely on me in a crisis. All I can do at this stage is promise that I will do everything I can to prove myself capable of coping with whatever is needed of me. I can't ask for more than that." He smiled then. "I made the mistake of underestimating you the first time we met. I've watched you carefully since then and have come to realize you were capable of more than sitting in an office. We are living in extraordinary times, Grace. Times that are demanding more of us than we thought we were capable of. That has to be faced and accepted, because it is the only way we are going to win this war." "I am prepared to face any challenge. I wouldn't have agreed to this otherwise. And I wouldn't have asked you if I thought you were content to sit out this war in an office. Have you flown before?" "No." "Didn't James ever take you up in his plane?" Grace laughed. "No, but I often wished he would." "Well, you'll get your chance today, though it won't be as comfortable. It will get us to Scotland quickly, and that is the main thing. There isn't any time to waste. This mission must go ahead on time, even if I have to go alone." "You won't have to do that. I'm coming with you, Bill, even if I have to work myself to a standstill during the training." "I'm asking a great deal of you, but there are 2 reasons for the intensive training. I want you to be able to take care of yourself, and I need you to be fully aware of the dangers we might face while in France." When Dan had manhandled her over the army assault course, it had been easy compared to this, Grace thought, as she eased herself into a hot bath with a groan of relief. She was bruised, battered, and ached from head to toe. Bill had said this training was because he wanted her to be able to take care of herself. Well, she certainly would be able to after this. It had been a tough physical 3 weeks, and many times she'd thought it wasn't possible to endure another day. When at her lowest, she would glance across at Bill watching her, and she had gathered her strength together and carried on. A smile crossed her face. It had all been worth it, though, because today she had actually been able to throw a man flat onto his back. Tomorrow they were off to Ringwood Airfield, near Manchester, for parachute training. She only had 1 week to master that. Bill had jokingly said there was nothing to it. When the door opened, you just threw yourself out. It was the landing you had to be careful about. Grace climbed out of the bath, dried off, and fell straight into bed. She needed to sleep, so there was no point worrying now and keeping awake. It would be time enough to worry when she was facing the challenge. After the parachute training, there was only one more stop, and that was to learn Morse code, among other things. That should be interesting. Grace watched the ground rushing towards her and braced for the landing, trying to remember everything she'd been told. She mustn't injure herself now. Concentrating hard, she rolled as she hit the ground, then scrambled to her feet and began to gather up the parachute. Bill had landed in the same field, and as he walked towards her, she grinned. "I did it!" Grace was almost dancing with excitement. "And I do believe you enjoyed it," Bill laughed. "I really did. It was the most incredible feeling." "Don't forget that the next time you jump it'll be in the dark. We will go when there's a bright moon, though, so we should be able to see where we're landing. Ah, here's the truck. I'll buy you a drink. You deserve it." "Where are we going next?" Grace asked, when they were settled in a quiet corner of the bar. Bill had been very economical with his information so far, but now they were nearing the end of the training, she was hoping to be told more about this operation. "A place in the New Forest. I'm cutting that to only 5 days, so just do the best you can. It's the beginning of June now, and the forecast is for favourable weather in about 7 days." Her insides tightened at this news, but she smiled. "Nearly there, then?" Bill nodded. "I have some final arrangements to make, so I won't be with you this time. I'll settle you in and then pick you up after. Only when we are ready to go will I tell you the plan." Ah, that answered one of her questions then. She wouldn't know exactly what she had let herself in for until the very last minute. "I understand. When are we leaving for the next camp?" "At 1800 hours. Grace finished her drink quickly. "I'd better go and pack at once." They arrived too late for dinner, but evidently they were used to serving meals at odd times. Grace was starving by the time Bill took her to the dining room. He had left immediately, not even stopping for something to eat. He appeared to know his way around these places, she thought as she sat down. She'd seen a very different side to him over the last few weeks, and there was no doubt he knew what he was doing with undercover work. She now understood why he disappeared from time to time. He'd once told her jokingly that he was a spy, and she had a strong feeling that was exactly the kind of work he was involved in. "Hello, Grace." The familiar voice had her leaping to her feet. "Helen, how wonderful to see you. It did cross my mind that you might be here when I knew we were coming to this area." Her friend laughed. "It's good to see you as well, but I'm not sure I'm too happy to see you in this place. I'm just here to learn Morse code. Sit down and talk to me while I eat. I'm ravenous. I didn't dare eat anything before." She stopped abruptly, remembering Bill's warning about being careful what she said if she met anyone she knew. It was hard to keep secrets from her friend, though. "Have you seen Tim and James lately?" Helen asked as she sat down. Grace nodded and waited while a meal was put in front of her. She talked about the 2 men for a while and then said, "I'll be here for a few days, Helen, so perhaps we could have a few meals together." "I won't be here. I heard you were coming and wanted to see you before I left." Helen grasped Grace's hands tightly and whispered, "You take care." "I will, and you do the same." The look they gave each other didn't need words. They knew both of them were involved in dangerous work. Chapter 21. The sun was going down, and Grace stood by the window watching the light fade. Would there be a full moon tonight? Everyone was confident there would be, and they were already at the airfield, ready to go at a moment's notice. Nervous? Bill came and stood beside her, placing an arm across her shoulders. Yes. There was no point in lying. Waiting is the worst part. You'll be all right once we're on our way. How many times have you done this, Bill? A few. Being able to speak German like a native's useful, and that's why Stan has tried so hard to recruit Dan. Would have made a good team. But he's a fighting man, and a fine one, from what I've heard. We all have different talents, and they must be used to the best advantage. Grace smiled. It would be difficult for Dan to blend into a crowd with his height. Oh, I think he could do anything he set his mind to. Would you have taken him with you, if he'd been available? Not this time. I need a beautiful woman who speaks fluent French. An Air Force officer came towards them with papers in his hands and a distracted look on his face. Just received the final report, Captain. You're good to go tonight at 2300 hours. Bill drew in a deep breath. Thank you, sir. Clear night forecast? He nodded to them both and then turned and left the room. As soon as they were alone again, Bill led Grace over to a couple of armchairs. Time to brief you. The Germans have taken over a chateau set in extensive grounds. It's heavily guarded. Photos have revealed nothing, and the resistance have been unable to discover exactly what it's being used for. The only thing we know is that high-ranking officers are continually going in and out. The resistance have to remain hidden, but I don't. However, this time I can't do it alone, and that's where you come in. I'm going to pass myself off as a German officer on leave with a French lover who's showing me some of her country. You visited the chateau as a child with your parents to buy wine, and you take me there to see if they still produce excellent wines. When we are denied entry, you will need to show great disappointment, upset that you have brought me all this way from Paris for nothing. Speak rapidly in French, and while I'm trying to calm you, it will give me a chance to be friendly with the guards. End of CD 6.